Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And Brian, it's been a crazy last couple of weeks, and I feel like now we're finally starting to get our footing under us. And we've kind of have our wits about us after the craziness of the Notre Dame and the playoff discussion and their decision to sit out of the bowl game. And I figured this would be a good time now. I talk about it. Brian talks about it at the start of every episode, every segment that we do here in the Irish Breakdown Podcast. But extremely thankful for our partnership with our friends over at FanDuel. It's been a really fun ride. I mean, specifically for me, I'm a sports bettor. I used FanDuel way before we got this partnership at Irish Breakdown, so that's been a little cool piece for me. And obviously now
there was nobody more excited on the staff when I told people we were partnering with FanDuel than Trevor was.
Yeah, man, it was sure. It was cool. And when we would talk betting lines on the show before, I would always reference FanDuel numbers, so it was kind of destined to be, I guess you could say. So a lot of fun. Really excited to see where this continues to go. But friendly reminder: the college football playoffs do start this weekend. I know you guys are like me, significantly less interested, right? Because Notre Dame's not in it, but. Quick refresher of some of the lines here on FanDuel. Some of them I thought were interesting. We've talked a lot about the over-under, the Alabama-Oklahoma game. Brian, the over-under on FanDuel is still set at 40.5 for that first-round matchup, which is pretty gross. But we figured because of the style of how the two teams played, it would be relatively low. Texas A&M is currently 3.5-point favorites at home over Miami. And then obviously Ole Miss and Oregon are both three possession favorites over Tulane and James Madison. Oregon's 21.5-point favorites, and Ole Miss is 17.5-point favorites. So not really expecting that many close games. So we'll see what happens.
To be expected. I mean, that's kind of how first round games go. That's what was so lame about the overreaction to last year's first round. I'm like, this is what the semifinals have basically been since 2014. Like the majority of the semifinal games were not competitive. There were some good ones. I mean, Georgia, Oklahoma in 2017, TCU, Michigan in 23, that was 22, right? Georgia and Michigan was 2022. TCU, Michigan was 2022. But a lot of these games weren't really competitive. Like the Texas-Washington game from 2023 or 2022, that'd be 23. That was more of a late comeback. That was more like the Notre Dame-Ohio State game was last year than anything else. So I just whatever. It's going to be, I think, even if they're close games, I think it's just going to be ugly football. In my
Agreed.
opinion.
I think so too. But folks, we do have a really fun show planned for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the transfer portal, and we've split this up into a couple of different parts. First, we're just going to kind of talk about, state of the union, where the transfer portal's at, what it means for Notre Dame, what it's meant for Notre Dame before in the past, and with this House settlement, what it means moving forward. And then in part 2 and 3 of today's show, we're going to be diving down into the specifics on either side of the ball. Now, the portal doesn't open up until January 2nd. It's open from January 2nd to January 16th. So big picture, we're going to talk about, as the roster stands right now, what are the needs that Notre Dame will look for in the transfer portal. And part 2 is going to be offense, and then part 3 is going to be defense and special teams. So a lot of interesting conversation here today, Brian. I'm excited to dive into this. And obviously with the state of college football the way it is now, the transfer portal is a hot topic of discussion.
It is. And you never know, Trev. There may be some news that breaks during the show that we may just have to, talk about at the end of the show. You never know. We may have something like that happen today as well. And if that does happen, we'll talk about it at the end of the show today. But the transfer portal is certainly a hot topic, Trev, and it has changed the game of college football in some ways good and in some ways not good. In some ways, I think the transfer portal has hurt the game. I think it has really hurt the ability to team build the way that it was done in the past in a way that I think is beneficial to players. You don't see players staying around for 3-4 years of consistent development. We don't see that as much anymore. What we tend to see now is if guys aren't happy with their current circumstances, they just jump in the portal. And coaches can't coach kids as hard in some instances as they used to because the kid doesn't like how things are going or isn't treated a certain way, just jump in the portal. I mean, it really is a disappointing change in a lot of ways, but in other ways, it's been good for the game because if not for the transfer portal, Indiana is not Indiana. I don't care how good of a coach Curt Cignetti is, he's not taking the roster he would have inherited in the old system and turned it into a playoff contender in a year. It was his ability to bring in a bunch of players who came with him. Like, that's the right way of the transfer portal, right? I mean, coach leaves, he takes a lot of his best players with him, guys that get an opportunity to go from the G5 level to the Power 4 level. And there are some benefits. I'm not someone who believes players shouldn't be able to transfer. I transferred after my freshman year, and I was a starter as a true freshman and still transferred. But I think it's changed the game in some bad ways. I mean, you're seeing coaching at certain positions is not as good as it used to be. It's just been a really messy process. And the reality is it's going to get even messier this offseason, Trevor. It is. And, we're in a situation now where, you've got this new agreement, right? That is technically been agreed to, but it's not in practice yet, and all these other different things. And Notre Dame is going to be one of the teams that's going to honor it, and that's basically this new cap. With rev share now being part of it, the cap is now in place, and this is kind of our new reality. And so for Notre Dame, as we look at this, Trev, the new reality is the way that the way that the process is going to go this offseason is going to be a lot different than the way it's gone in past off seasons. You're not going to be able to just have every player who's bought in be able to come back and stay, because now there's basically a cap on how much you can pay players. And there's a cap on, certain things that Notre Dame is going to honor. Pete Bavacqua talked about this, some of the commitments being made to coaches who are being hired. It's like, yeah, that's not legal. I mean, you're not allowed to spend that much money on your roster. And so all these things are just situations where you can't always do what you want to do. We'll dive into some of those things as well. Actually, we can talk about it now. I mean, we'll get more specific during the position parts, but you have a player on your team who's a starter, whose agent is fielding offers during the season for that player, to where Notre Dame and other schools are going to kind of have to sometimes make decisions during the season on, are we going to be able to bring this guy back next year? Because his agent's asking for X amount of dollars, and we can't pay that kind of money. Not for him. Not when we've got a salary cap now. And so that kid's like, okay, well, I'm being offered, 1 point something million by these other schools. Notre Dame may only feel, or Florida or Texas or Ohio State may feel, well, man, we can't afford to pay that money. We don't think that, that's value. Their teams are going to overpay for you because they have a need, where we can't overpay for you because we don't have that same need. So unfortunately, we got to make the decision to let you walk, or we overpay for you, and now we're screwed somewhere else, and we got to let somebody else walk. It's really just kind of a sad, sick reality of where the sport is. And once again, it comes down to the leadership in college football is an absolute failure. There's a real simple fix to all this. Take the rev share, split it amongst all your scholarship players the same, and then allow players to make whatever they can make legally in the NIL process. That's how it should be. Every player that's on scholarship gets X amount of dollars. Every walk-on gets X amount of dollars. All the same for everybody. That's a rev share. And then if CJ Carr can go get a couple more $1 million in NIL endorsements, as long as, again, there's rules in place on what an NIL deal looks like. It's not just pay for play. But look, man, I'm a local car dealer, and it's worth me to give you $500,000 to appear in 5 and 6 commercials on TV or audio and come to a couple signings and things like that at our dealership, because I'm going to make way more than the $500,000 off you in additional revenue because of people that are going to come into my store because of the brand awareness that we get because you are a sponsor for me. There should be no cap on that. If I think it's worth $500,000, I'll be able to pay that. If another car dealership thinks it's worth $2 million for him to have that, then they should be allowed to do that, as long as there's a legitimate exchange of goods and services, right? We give you $2 million, you've got to come to minimum this, minimum that, and then we're good to go, right? I mean, those are the things that's how it should be. There should be no caps on how much a player can make. There's no cap on how much a coach can make. The cap should be, what are people willing to pay? That should be the cap. And unfortunately, we're now in this world where you create an arbitrary cap that people aren't going to follow, that has no real teeth, because if Texas Tech, for example, wanted to pay $40 million for its roster next year, and I'm just using them as an example, I'm not saying they're doing this, and that's against the rules and they get sued, guess what? They're just, they get hammered. They're going to sue the NCAA or sue whoever, and they're going to win, and we're just wasting time. But other schools who choose to follow the rules are then going to suffer because they're not able to compete. That's kind of the whole point of why this whole thing sucks. It does.
I mean, that's the unfortunate reality of college football now. I mean, and we've seen a bunch of different coaches and different programs take different routes to how they're going to navigate this. I mean, on one hand, and they all fill in the different extremes. On one hand, you have the Dabo Sweeneys of the world that just, up until this past offseason, they just kind of wanted to close a blind eye and act like none of it was real. Well, hey, I'm not touching the transfer portal. I'm not getting involved with this NIL stuff. If people want to be here, they'll be here, and we trust our guys, and that it is what it is. Then on the flip side of the coin, you've had schools like Florida State who are like, we are only going to utilize the transfer portal and put together NIL deals. And so I'm very interested to see what, this means in pertains to Notre Dame and what it means for them of, okay, the core belief, or really the core goal every single season, year in and year out, is to win a national championship. Now you have a bunch of different things that you have to navigate. And so for Notre Dame, it's one, this goes back to me loving the hire of Mike Martin. With the NFL, with the NCAA and college football becoming more businesslike, I appreciate them bringing in somebody with an NFL background, somebody that has had to have those tough conversations before about salary cap, about, hey, you made a significant contribution to this team before, but hey, based on where we're at right now, we just can't afford to bring you back. And that's not me saying I agree with the current state of college football. That's just where it's at. And I fall in line with you, Brian. I don't like where it's at.
I got a veteran who's a good player, but not a great player, that some other schools willing to pay a lot more money than he probably should on an open market. And we're okay letting him walk because we've got a younger, cheaper rookie that you know what I mean? Like, that's what the NFL has to do. Hey, we've got this veteran 31-year-old, right tackle who is a good player, but not a great player. But this other team is desperate for a tackle, a solid tackle. So they're willing to pay him more than we think he's worth, and we're okay letting him walk because we got this guy we drafted in the second round next year or last year that's ready to kind of step in and develop, who's only making $700,000. That's the new college football. But there's less rules in place in the NFL. Like, agents can't be fielding offers from other teams in the National Football League. So just the whole thing is gross. But the reality for Notre Dame fans is this is going to be a different offseason for Notre Dame than it was last year, where most kids decided to stay. That's just going to be harder to have happen this year because of the cap, because of some of the new rules that are in place. I'm confident in saying there are going to be some players that you're like, wait a minute, that guy's transferring? Why? He's a starter, multi-year starter. Like, why is he going in the portal? Is Notre Dame not willing to pay that guy? Sometimes it's not about not being willing. Sometimes it's like, guys, I got these 5 studs. We can't afford all of them plus all these other players. We got to let somebody walk and trust that a younger player making a lot less money is going to be able to step in and handle it.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
The sad reality of where we are now.
The conversation this offseason, Brian, is going to be very much around, we have to separate it into 2 buckets, willing to and able to, especially with the salary cap. And with Pete Bavacqua openly coming out and saying, hey, I don't care what other schools are doing. I'm not the athletic director at other schools. They're going to do what they're going to do. I know what we are going to do here in South Bend. And it's going to be to follow in line with the guidelines set forth by the House settlement. And at the end of the day, you start getting into that conversation. It's different. You and I were talking before the show, Brian, about, look, it's not better, it's not worse for Notre Dame specifically. The House settlement and what's going on in college football is for the worse of the sport. I'm not going to say that it's better, but for Notre Dame specifically, depending on who jumps in or who leaves or who stays, it's not better or worse. I can already see some of the questions, the very valid questions, might I add. But the questions around, is the culture changing? Is this a locker room issue? No, it's not good. It's not bad. It's just different. And unfortunately, the state that Notre Dame is at is they have to work under the confines of the new state of college football. And one of the benefits of how good of a recruiting team and how good of a recruiting operation Marcus Freeman has put together is that they're bringing in top-level talent year in and year out. The negative is that there's just going to be some household names that might not be on the roster in 2026. And that's just a reality that, unfortunately, we're going to have to live with. I don't love it, but that's just where we're at. It's really unfortunate.
Look, I think you all know me well enough to know that if Notre Dame is in the wrong, I'll tell you they're in the wrong. If Notre Dame screws a player over, if Notre Dame's not honest with a player, if Notre Dame makes a bad decision, I'll tell you. I think people know that. That's why some people love this show, and that's why some people hate this show, to be completely honest with you. And that's okay. We're going to let you guys know if something happens, if, like, look, Notre Dame dropped the ball on this. If some of the things that we think are going to happen this offseason happen, I think the fan reaction from some is going to be asking the questions you ask. Is something wrong? Did they do something wrong? Is so-and-so to blame for this? Especially if it's a position coach that maybe we're not high on or whatever. And if that's the case, we'll tell you, hey, Notre Dame screwed this up. Here's why this kid's leaving. Notre Dame screwed this up. Other times we'll be like, hey, guys, listen, they had to make a business decision. And this is where, where they are right now. So the question is going to have to be like, look, there may be some starters leaving this offseason to take bigger deals because Notre Dame cannot afford to pay that guy, and that guy. Just the reality of the situation. And that's what the world of college football has changed even from where it was a year ago. And I just think it's important to say that because I think it is going to look different. And I think if people don't understand the new reality of college football, it could lead some to believe that there's a flaw at Notre Dame that's causing them to lose. Why are they losing starters? They didn't lose starters last year if that happens. So I just think that's going to be. And then for Notre Dame, you have to think about, like, are we going to alter our process at all? How does it alter our process? Do we have to alter our portal process? Do we over-recruit high school every year, knowing that we may have to process some guys out? There's a lot of things that go into how Notre Dame is going to have to handle its roster development in this new era. It may some years cause them to go to the portal more than they'd like to because of certain players, proving themselves to be, maybe not ready, and they lose a guy and not a guy they wanted to lose. That's the thing is, if you lose a guy you understood you're going to lose and you made that decision, then it means you've got people in line. Sometimes you're going to lose guys that you didn't think you were going to lose, and now you're scrambling. And that's just the new reality that Notre Dame finds themselves. I don't know that last one is going to happen, but you have to be prepared for it if you're Notre Dame. You can't just assume that every kid is loyal and bought in, is not going to go anywhere. And that's where they're at. And I think that's why you saw Notre Dame go big in the recruiting class in 2027 or 2026. I think that's why you saw them bring in 27 guys. You're like, man, did they really have that many needs for certain positions? Well, those guys, that guy's going to be a cheaper backup than so-and-so is going to be a cheaper backup. You know what I mean? Like those type of things. And so it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how it all shakes out. And then how does it impact Notre Dame? How do they shake up their roster? And then how does decisions that happen, because like our show, when we dive into, we're going to get into offense and what the biggest needs are and what we think is going to happen. We're not going to talk so much about specific players because the reality is, I would guess that a chunk of Notre Dame's portal class, not all, but a chunk of their incoming portal class are guys who aren't even in the portal yet. And I refuse to talk about guys that aren't in the portal yet. There are some guys in the portal that I'm like, if I'm Notre Dame, I'm looking at that guy. But guys that are already in the portal, a lot of times are guys that are just kind of getting in for a bidding war, or their coaches have been fired or whatever. And we don't always know how that's going to, like, does Notre Dame want to get into a bidding war with a guy at a position? That's, again, that goes into, we can't afford to do that. Because here's the sad truth of the modern college game. Teams like Ohio State, Notre Dame, Georgia have much tougher decisions to make when it comes to who they offer on their team and what they offer on their team, and then how much they can spend in the portal, because they have more stable rosters. And the more stable your roster is and the deeper your roster is, the harder it is to go max out on a D tackle in the portal that everybody wants. Because, of course, that school can do it, because the rest of their D-line rotation is not very good. They don't have a lot of guys that they got to get a lot of money to, where Notre Dame may be like, hey, we'd love to pay $3 million to that D tackle, and we think we could get him here. but all we can offer is 1.2 because I got to pay this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy who helped us have one of the best D-lines of college football this past year. Whereas this school is willing to go top dollar because their D-line stunk. They don't have a lot of guys making money, and so they can throw top dollar to the kid. Or that school's overpaying because they don't plan on sticking to the rules. They're going to go over. And that's kind of the new reality. And so that is going to impact who Notre Dame can get, whether or not they're going to be able to get that big name guy at D tackle, which is the guy that all the fans want, or an under the radar guy that fans are like, that's the best you can do, who ends up being better than a lot of the top name guys, which is exactly what happened with Jared Dawson last year.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame is in a very interesting spot, and it's going to affect every aspect of roster management. I mean, I think it's also going to affect what type of players they try to convince to bring back. You know, and I don't think Jeremiah Love is coming back. I know he's made some cryptic comments, and he seems very internally torn. And from everything that I've heard about Jeremiah Love, and Brian, from everything you've said about Jeremiah Love, I understand why this isn't just like an easy, like, yeah, I'm going to the NFL. Sure. It's been a great year. I understand that completely. But then there's other players, and let me preface, I'm just using this as an example. But with the new roster management limits, the cap limits, it also kind of begs into question, like, okay, like how much effort do we put into bringing in like a Jadarian Price, bringing him back? How much of that cap space is that going to eat up? NFL teams have to face that all the time. You know, you see teams, like I remember back when, there were some teams that were like, oh, we have a really premier wide receiver, but he's at the end of his contract. He could come back, but like kind of at the end of his prime, that type of thing. Jadarian Price is nowhere near the end of his prime, but you have to start talking about how much cap space that wide receiver would eat up. And for example, a player like Jadarian Price would eat up more of a cap space than Kedron Young would. That's just how the cap would work. But overarching, Brian, I think the interesting thing about where Notre Dame is at is, I think philosophically, I think that they were going to maintain with the same philosophy of, hey, we build through high school and we supplement through the portal. Now, key part in that is I think the supplemental part of that is going to look different year over year. It depends on who leaves, who they can't convince to come back, who they won't convince to come back. And so to the naked eye, supplementing through the portal might mean bringing in 11 guys. I don't know what that looks like. Or supplementing through the portal could look like bringing in like 6. Yeah, I think looking more in between the lines, this conversation becomes a lot more interesting because I think depending on who they take, when they take, compounded with who departs, we are also going to be able to get a relatively good idea of how the coaches are evaluating their current roster. For example, say that a couple of players leave, like impact players or like starters from the previous season, and the coaching staff and Mike Martin and his staff don't elect to backfill him in the portal. That tells me, and I'm looking between the lines here, but that tells me that they're confident in the people that they have coming back, that the development of those younger guys is going extremely, extremely well. Then in other cases, if they have people leave, say they have a couple of defensive linemen leave, this is all speculatory, but say they have a couple of defensive linemen leave or something, and then they immediately go to backfill. That tells me that Al Washington has his work cut out for him in the offseason to get some of those younger guys up to speed. Not that he can't, not that they won't. That just kind of gives me a window in of where the current roster is. So all of this leads for a very, very interesting discussion when it comes to Notre Dame, especially with how they've done the transfer portal in the past. Notre Dame has never been known to bring in huge waves of transfers, but I still think overarching, the thing that I want to put out there is it will still be in the spirit of you supplement through the transfer portal, you build through high school recruiting. Mm-hmm. Just some years that supplemental piece is going to look different.
And I think that's why you saw Notre Dame kind of overload at certain positions in the 2026 class. Yeah. I think there's a question that was asked in the chat that needs to be addressed now because it's a very good question because I don't think that a lot of people, like the answers to this have not been out there. It's just been all kind of so chaotic. But Stymie asks, is NIL sports specific? So let me just pull up his question. He goes, is NIL sports specific, meaning if a football player were to also join Shrewsbury on the basketball team, could some of that cap space be buried on the basketball side hypothetically? Yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is because the $20.5 million cap is for the school and all of its athletes. The school will then determine how much of it goes to basketball, how much of it goes to lacrosse, baseball, et cetera, et cetera. And so the $20.5 million is not $20.5 million for the football team. It's $20.5 million for Notre Dame, for Ohio State, for Georgia, etc. Now, Notre Dame may say, hey, we're going to give 15 million to the football team. Georgia may say we're going to give 18 to the football team. And Ohio State may say we're going to give all 20.5 to the football team. They can make that decision. It's not going to go well because your other sports are going to suffer. But those are the decisions that all schools have to make. And then how much of that you give to the football team is going to be determined, how much your football team can spend. And so that's what makes this whole thing just kind of weird. Because, if you think about it, you're going to have 100 players on scholarship, walk-ons, 105 guys. All of them get something. I mean, they all get something. So let's say Notre Dame gives 18 of its $20.5 million to football, and you've got 105 guys in your roster. That's an average of $17,000 per player. That's it. So the reality is actually that's wrong. It's 170,000. I didn't put enough zeros in there. So just give me a second. It's $171,000 per player, which is still not a lot. And $171,000 per player. So you give $1.5 million to an offensive lineman to keep them to stay. Now you're what you can pay for the rest of your players goes way down. You pay your 5 studs $1 million each. Now, a third of your entire roster of 105 people is now wrapped up in 5 players. It's not an easy process. Now, there's some guys that are going to make less than $171,000. The whole thing is just kind of gross. The whole thing is just really gross. So, yeah.
There was another good question that popped up in the chat. I think it was from DJ, and he asked if the revenue share and NIL are separate. And I'm to understand it is correct. So for some of those more premier players, it's like the school would help them go out and sign other NIL deals to help. It's
a little bit fuzzy on how that is.
Okay.
It can't come from the school. That's the thing. So when schools are committing X amount of dollars to coaches, the school can't commit that. The school can only pay this amount. I believe that players can get some money on their own, but I'm not sure about that. I'm not 100% sure, but it can't be facilitated by the school. That's the difference. So schools their collectives can't give NIL deals that, get the roster to go beyond 20.5, those type of things. But I believe, I could be wrong, because again, this whole thing is just screwy. If CJ Carr signs a deal with New Balance and it was done through his agent, I believe then he's fine in that regard. But the problem is, as a recruiting operation, you can't promise certain things that are going to come from other people. I believe that's how that process works. Which makes the whole thing just very screwy. Very screwy.
Yeah, that makes it extremely messy. I mean, that makes sense. I've talked about it before, but it's kind of like in sales when you go from a base salary and then your commission. NIL would essentially be your commission on top. Whatever, I guess, whatever company that I work for in sales could never promise me it's you're going to make X amount of dollars from this company. I could see the recruiting process for Notre Dame being very much the same. It's hey, if you come here, you're just going to make X amount of dollars from Dick's Sporting Goods. I get that completely.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to clarify because I had the same question as DJ of is it separate? So that makes.
I believe it is, but it has to be completely separate. And so far it hasn't been. So far it's schools just getting money from their collectives and NIL deals, and they're the ones facilitating this. I don't think they can do that anymore. I could be wrong, and I'm still trying to learn about this because it changes constantly. So the whole thing is just ridiculous. The problem is Notre Dame will only be able to commit to 20.5, where you've got schools basically guaranteeing coaches, we're going to pay over $30 million. You can't legally do that. You can't legally guarantee that your school will pay X amount of dollars for NIL. That's the pushback, and that's the problem. So the whole thing is just a hot mess. That's why I say it should be split between all the players evenly, the rev share. Just however you want to do it, X amount goes to football, X amount goes to this school, and split it. And then NIL is just a completely separate thing that schools have nothing to do with. Because if agents are going to get all this money, then they should have to work for their money.
Sure.
But there are just so many other needs that I think are more important than that, like preventing tampering, like the fact that Notre Dame has players whose agents are fielding calls and offers for their players during the season. How does that impact the kid? You know what I mean? Like, how does that impact the player? Then you're like, I'm trying to play my season, and I know that this offseason, this school have already offered my agent money. Like, the whole thing is just really, really kind of sickening.
Yeah, guidelines absolutely have to be put in place. The Wild West of this just can't continue to go on. And Brian, you and I have a lot of conversations about this back line, and it's going to get worse if there's no rails or guidelines put in place. And unfortunately, that's the direction that this is heading, especially when some schools will just openly just go over the cap with no remorse. It's going to get really, really messy. I agree with you completely. Folks, that is going to do it for part one of today's show. We're getting ready to dive into the particulars on offense and defense. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for part two of the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, you have plenty of time to go over to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Sign up, get yourself a premium membership at the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part two of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're talking about the Notre Dame offense and some of their needs in the transfer portal. And this is, like you mentioned before in part one, we're staying away from talking about specific players because, again, we're about roughly 3 weeks away from the transfer portal actually being open. Well, there are potentially numerous portal targets for Notre Dame that will likely end up in the portal, but aren't yet, or may not end up in the portal. So there's very few names right now. So unfortunately, we can't have a conversation of all right, go get this person. This is more looking at Notre Dame specifically and looking at Notre Dame's roster internally and saying, hey, here are some places we think that would benefit you from supplementing through the transfer portal. So that's where this conversation is going to be geared. Part two, we're talking offense. Part three, we're talking defense and special teams. But at the end of the day, the transfer portal for Notre Dame's offense has been extremely helpful over the last couple seasons. You think in 2024, you get Riley Leonard, you get your starting boundary receiver in Bo Collins, you get a return man who, took one to the house in the Sugar Bowl in Jaden Harrison. You got Chris Mitchell, who stepped up due to some injuries, especially to Jordan Faison. Chris Mitchell stepped in and started for the majority of the season last year. And then obviously this year, Will Pauling was a captain. Malachi Fields was your starting boundary receiver for the majority of the season. So for all of the season. So the transfer portal has been extremely lucrative for Notre Dame when they've looked into it for offense. I expect that mentality to be the same as the roster stands right now. They're not going to go bring in 9 players through the transfer portal on offense. But that being said, that there are still some needs that need to be addressed.
Big time, and some very important needs, honestly, on the offensive side of the ball. But I think the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, it's a very interesting conversation because when I look at Notre Dame, I don't see a lot of needs from a starter standpoint. I see some, but I see a lot of needs from a depth standpoint. The big question for me on offense is, what are we going to see from this Notre Dame offensive coaching staff philosophically? Are they just going to keep this never-ending process of plugging in a portal player at certain positions every year? Or are we going to actually see them finally start focusing on developing the talented players they have? And I think this offseason is going to be the biggest question the biggest thing that's going to really answer that question for us is, what is their philosophy going to be on offense? We're just going to see them bring in 2 receivers every year? Or are they going to actually start coaching up the kids they have? Are we going to see them keep bringing in, multiple players at this position every year? Or are they going to start developing their players? Are they in we're a year away mode at certain positions where next year they may not need to do that, like we saw at nickel? Or are they just sort of in this lane forever? And I think when you start getting into specific needs, the first big need is wide receiver. And the volume of wide receiver is going to tell us a lot about the answer to that question. Now, what may change that is if we have a departure at wide receiver. And I'll just get it out there now. This isn't hidden information. What does Jaden Greathouse do? My hope is that Jaden Greathouse comes back. We've been told he's going to come back. When the portal opens and closes, and Jaden Greathouse is still part of the Notre Dame team, then I'll be comfortable. I got to sit here and say, guys, if I'm in Jaden Greathouse's shoes, I'm not thrilled about how things went this season. I'm going to need to have a come to Jesus conversation with the coaches and say, hey, do you believe in me or not? Like, look, I'll compete, I'll battle, I'll do this, but if I got to know that I'm going to actually be given that opportunity to be the guy, and you're not just going to go recruit some guy that the coach somewhere else that's just going to come in and kind of basically be kind of, put on my level when I've proven this at Notre Dame and he hasn't. I would have a certain feeling about that. Because somebody earlier asked me, why did I transfer? I transferred because I trust the coaching staff. I was lied to. They recruited me and said, you're going to get a chance to play quarterback. Third, fourth day of fall camp, I get moved to wide receiver. And then there just was a couple other things that happened during that year where it's like, you keep telling me one thing and doing another thing. Like, I don't trust you. I came to the school. I didn't really like the school. I made a very immature decision to which college to pick. I made a decision on I went the Division III level over other schools because I wanted to play quarterback. So I picked a school that didn't have a very good academic situation. There was a lot that went into it. And I wasn't really happy there. And so then when the coaches start being dishonest with me, even though I'm playing and we're winning, that trust is gone. That's the biggest reason I think a player should ever transfer is their trust. Now, that's my outside perception. Jaden Greathouse may have none of those issues. He may know exactly why things happened, how things happened, and has no problem with it. I don't know. I'm giving you my view on it as an outsider. And that's why I'm going to be nervous about it until we get through this process and he's still here. If Jaden Greathouse comes back, you have two really good, experienced, proven wide receivers coming back. You also have a lot of talented younger players that have not been given that same opportunity. I look at it like this. If I can go get a Malachi Fields type of player in the portal, not just Malachi Fields from a guy that's produced, but a boundary, then I'm willing to go that route. There's one player in the portal right now that I think fits that mold, and it's a guy that I'd be interested in, and there's really the only guy that I'll bring up a ton during the show is Nick Marsh. That would be an example of a player that I think could kind of fit into that mold at Notre Dame. He's got that kind of, that boundary talent. He's a proven player. He's done very well at Michigan State the last couple of years in an offense that otherwise kind of struggled. He's similar to Malachi. He's not as big as Malachi. He's probably about an inch and a half shorter than Malachi. He's not as strong as Malachi because Malachi was a fifth-year senior. Nick Marsh was a sophomore. But there's a lot of similarities to his game. He'd be a guy that I look at, but like him or somebody like him, I'd consider. That's it. I mean, as long as Greathouse comes back, that's all I want to see. Well, we went got this guy for depth. Screw that. You got plenty of talent. Coach up Logan Saldate. Coach up KK Smith. Coach up Cam Williams. Because I promise you right now, the odds of you bringing in a player that has more God-given physical talent than Cam Williams is slim to none unless Cam Coleman jumps in the portal and decides he wants to come to Notre Dame. Or Jeremiah Smith jumps in the portal, or Carnell Tate jumps in the portal, and one of those guys jumps in the portal and wants to come to Notre Dame. If they do, great. You take them. Because I love the guys on the roster, but none of them are as good as those guys. So when I look at it, I see, unless it's like Nick Marsh or better player, I'm kind of good with what you got. You've got Cam Williams can play the boundary. You've got Micah Gilbert can play the boundary. You're bringing in Caden Finley who can play the boundary. You're bringing in Devin Fitzgerald who can play the boundary. So I'm not bringing in a Caleb Smith. Remember him from a couple years ago, the kid from Virginia Tech? Solid player, nice player. I'm not bringing in a Bo Collins unless that guy's totally fine sitting the bench. But with all due respect, I don't really trust Mike Brown to not play a portal guy over a younger guy. And I don't even know that it's necessarily Mike Brown's decision. You know, I mean, he has bosses too. So my point is, if Greathouse comes back, and somebody says Greathouse not playing was more the hamstring injury. No, it wasn't. Greathouse's issues this year were before the hamstring injury. But the point is, if he comes back, you've got one position of need, and that's at boundary. And if you can get a top-level player, a Malachi Fields type, a Nick Marsh type, a Cam Coleman type, then go get that guy, because that guy makes you better. If it's a more unproven player, I don't know that I want to go there. And as long as Greathouse comes back, I'm not bringing anybody to the field. If he leaves and I can get a impact caliber talent in the portal, a Mario Craver, a Casey Concepcion type of guy from last year that can play, I don't even know that those would be good examples, because I think they're both more better slots. But if I could go get a pure Z, and then I can move Jordan Faison to his more comfortable spot at slot, it's where I think he's best, then I would go there. But if Greathouse comes back, I think you're set to the field. You've got Greathouse, you've got Faison, you've got KK, you've got Saldate, you've got Elijah Burris, you've got Scrap Richardson, you're bringing in Bubba Frazier, you're bringing in Braden Robinson, Caden Finley can play there. You got Dylan Faison. Like, I mean, Trevor, I did the breakdown of the roster yesterday. I put the scholarship chart out. There's a lot of freaking receivers on the roster right now.
14.
You know what I mean? Like
scholarship.
And there's talented guys too. I mean, Notre Dame right now has 14 scholarship receivers slated to come back next year, combined with the 4 incoming freshmen. You got 9 guys coming back. You've got 5 incoming freshmen. If you can't get 4 to 5 guys that can go out there and play with CJ Carr, then I got a question. Do you know how to recruit high school receivers? And if you do you know how to develop high school receivers?
That's my biggest question about receiver coaching moving forward. It's great that they can block their butts off downfield. It's something that's absolutely needed. And I don't want to completely discredit that, but fact of the matter is this is state of the state for Notre Dame's wide receiver room. You mentioned it, 14 scholarship players. 11 of them have sophomore eligibility or younger. 11 of them. And only 3 of them have sophomore eligibility or younger. The rest are freshmen, eligibility-wise, or they're true freshmen. I have to believe that the Notre Dame coaching staff between Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock and Mike Brown don't all think that all 11 of those super young guys are going to stay in that room, especially given the state of everything that we just talked about in the first part of today's show about the transfer portal. I can't believe that the coaching staff would be that naive to say, yeah, they'll just all be here when they're redshirt juniors and redshirt seniors, and then they're going to ball. It's like, now's the time. I think you hit on something that's extremely important. Based on the number, given some sort of attrition in Notre Dame's current roster, despite some attrition happening, we are going to get an idea of the state of development going on in that wide receiver room if they bring in multiple wide receivers. And that is something that I'll just be honest, and this is just me, I don't want to speak for anybody else. That's something that I'm concerned with. I've seen some things like in between, but like I've mentioned before, this is back-to-back springs where we've seen 2 true freshmen like, yeah, dude, they're getting ready to play. Get asked about a lot throughout all of the fall camp press conferences and get asked about in the spring press conferences. We hear about them all through the summer. And then once the season rolls around, they're a ghost. In 2024 spring, it was Micah Gilbert. Then this past spring, it was Elijah Burris. And then none of them really contributed in those seasons. And that's something that's like, okay, I can kind of hang my hat on the fact that they were true freshmen at the time. Maybe an 18-year-old isn't ready to just come in and start playing 20 to 25 snaps a game. That's okay. But now some of those guys that sometimes people were hanging their hats on, they're still young. It's like, okay, well, Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams are getting ready to be redshirt sophomores. Like, right. They're juniors. Now's the time. If they haven't been developed up to this point and it's starting to become a mass problem, Brian, like you've always talked about, when it's one person, it's the player. There's something that the player needs to start doing differently. When we start talking about 5, 6, 7 guys that are just like, yeah, they're all just not ready yet. It's like, well, who's getting them ready? That's going to be something that's going to be very interesting to see what they do in the portal. But yes, big picture, I agree with you. I think that they're going to have to bring in a boundary. Right now, their biggest receiver on roster is Micah Gilbert. Like, he's 6'2", 200 and let me see.
Yeah, him and Cam are about the same size. 6'2", 200 to 205. Yeah.
Yep, right. And then I'll be very interested to see what Caden Finley's actual height is. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I don't think he's just 6 foot.
They list him at 6 feet tall. I've talked to so many people that are like, dude, I've stood next to that kid. He's not 6 feet tall. He's definitely grown. But is he best suited for the boundary, for the Z? You've got Devin Fitzgerald coming in. That's why I say I'm good going to the boundary. Like, with all due respect, you have to do what's best for your football team also. And what I mean by that is, if there's a difference maker that's in the portal that, yeah, maybe Cam Williams, maybe Micah Gilbert could be this, but this guy is already that, then I understand going to the portal. You have to understand that sometimes when you make those decisions, though, it means that you're going to end up losing that player that you're passing on. I don't know if that's going to happen, or I'm just making a point. It's got to be a proven guy. If Notre Dame whiffs on a former 5-star recruit that has not produced at his current school, but they're going to give a shot here, I'm like, well, then just go with Cam Williams or Micah Gilbert. I mean, Cam Williams is a former 5-star recruit who's raw and hasn't had that, opportunity to prove himself yet. Coach him up. You know what I mean? Like, that's how you make your money, in my opinion. But at the same time, there are some receivers that are going to jump in the portal that I'm like, dude, I think that guy could make Notre Dame better. And I think this is the one position is for me. It's like, if you're going to bring in size, I'm all for it. If proven size, that's what I think this needs. Now, the reality is here's how I would handle it if I was Notre Dame. I'd go out there and get a guy with proven size and proven production. Nick Marsh is an example I point to. He's in the portal. I don't mind talking about him. If there's interest there and he's a fit into the school and into the program, like he's going to come in and be a good teammate and all that, and I don't know if he is or isn't, then I'd take a guy like Nick Marsh in a heartbeat. But I'm not going to stop coaching up Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams either, because I think those guys have talent to where play them all. Like, this thing is, if Cam's ready to go, coach him up too. And then maybe you've got a good rotation there. Maybe you can put one to the Z, all these type of things. So that's what I'm saying is, if you can give me a legit size guy that's proven, a Malachi Fields type, a Nick Marsh type, I think you'd have to go look there. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, agreed.
But that's it.
And honestly, Brian, I think that's a good caveat to put in any portal discussion. I mean, look, outside of what? Quarterback, corner, probably safety. I think all other positions are kind of up for debate. If it's like, hey, if maybe defensive end, if just like a top level guy puts his name into the portal, you'd be doing your program a disservice if you didn't at least field a discussion. I don't really think that there's a quarterback out there that jumps into the portal. It's like, hey, we should talk to this guy.
It's not DJ Lagway.
No,
it's not Brandon Sorsby. It's not, any of the guys that have jumped in the portal. So there just isn't that guy. If Julian Sayin jumped in the portal tomorrow, I'm like, I'm good. I think you might have the best quarterback in college football coming back next year.
Yeah. Agreed.
So no, you don't look there.
Agreed.
Quarterback. If you were to tell me I could get another Leonard Moore that could play the field, sure. I mean, I'd be a fool to not look at that. And I'm one of the biggest defenders of Christian Gray out there, and I want to coach up the younger players. But if a proven guy, let's say the kid from LSU wants to jump into Portland and is like, dude, I want to go to Notre Dame and I want me and Leonard Moore to be the best cornerback in college football. Yeah, I'm taking that guy. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to take that. That's not going to happen. I'm just making a point. But there just aren't those guys out there. And the whole point is, to get those guys, you're going to have to pay a lot of money. And in this current era, I don't know that you can guarantee that.
Sure.
You got to get a guy that really wants to be here. So that's where I want to focus on. Yeah, it's got to be about, does this make our football team better now and in the future? And the thing I like about a guy like Nick Marsh is he does have 2 years of eligibility left. Now, if he came in, had a big year, sure, he may go, but that would be one that I'd be intrigued by, because there is some proven there'd be some proven aspects to his ability. And that's why I think receiver is one that I look at and say, I am definitely got my eyes open for an impact receiver if he's got some size.
Yeah.
If Jaden Greathouse leaves, that might change things a little bit. You may need a second. I don't think it's a given, but you may need a second. I just missed one thing I miss about the game is I feel like the portal can create complacency and laziness on a coaching staff, where it's easier to go out and get a guy that's been developed by somebody else. It's easier to do that. I'm not saying this is true for Notre Dame. I'm saying this is in general in college football. It can be easier to say, look, let's just go get this guy that's already proven he can play at the SEC level rather than taking this, raw, young, talented kid that hasn't proven it and, run the risk of what if it doesn't work out, how's that going to go?
Oh,
that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, what the portal does is it helps teams hide the fact that they've struggled developing young talent. I mean, one school that I'll point to specifically, I mean, look at Florida State. Who's the last quarterback that they sat down and developed? I mean,
closest thing to it's Jordan Travis, but even he was a transfer. At least he transferred after like a year at Louisville.
Sure.
He wasn't established at Louisville. So I guess that's the closest thing they've done to that, dude. Seriously.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what I think the portal, unfortunately, has done for some teams, is it masks the fact that they've struggled in high school recruiting. And it also masks the fact that sometimes there may be coaches on their staff that struggle developing young talent. And that's what stinks about the portal. Like, I'm with you. I miss the days of hearing about, hey, you remember this kid? He was a highly touted recruit back in 2011. Now it's 2013, and they're here, man. Like, they're ready to make a big splash. But now it's, this team got so-and-so from this school, but he was also previously at this school where he had some relationships with this guy, and he should have a big year. It's just tough. That is one thing that I miss for sure. I'm with you. Brian, we talked about the wide receiver being the biggest need, but there are some other needs on offense, and some for different reasons. What are some of those other needs in the portal?
Well, I got to shout out some love to my guy Trevor. We're talking about tight ends a little bit. I think the tight end position is one that the Notre Dame staff has to at least keep an eye on in the portal. But this is a different one because this one more depends on what is the health of your room and what do you think of your room. Like Ty Washington obviously played a bunch this year. In the past, Raridan leaves. And then here's another thing. There's this rule that's going to be voted on by the courts about whether guys have 4 years to play 5 or just 5 years to play 5. If that rule goes into effect soon, what does that mean for guys like Eli Raridan? Could he then come back? Right now, we're working with the assumption that rule doesn't get passed and doesn't impact the current group of players. So we're just going to look at it normally. Assuming everybody comes back, is Ty Washington that guy that just steps into the number 1 role? I don't think so. I think he's more of a complementary player. I think he's more of a number 2, number 3 tight end. So then you have to ask yourself, between Cooper Flanagan, Jack Larson, and James Flanagan, I'm just going in order of seniority, do we feel like we have a number 1 in that group? And if you feel Cooper Flanagan can be a number 1, do you trust his health enough? A guy that came back, you thought you were going to get him, he plays 1 game, kind of has some issues, has to sit out of here. Now that he kind of got a whole year to rest, essentially, do you feel he's going to be healthy enough to be the guy next year? That's the question they have to ask themselves. Do you think James Flanagan is ready to kind of step into that role? That's a question you have to ask yourself. And then, do you think Ian Premer and Preston or Preston Frizzell can help you? And do you think Jack Larson can help you? I look at it like this. I don't know what the coaching staff thinks of the younger talent outside of James Flanagan. I know they're very high on him. And when I say I don't know, I genuinely mean I don't know. I have not been told bad things about Jack Larson or good things about Jack Larson. I haven't been, you know what I mean? Like I haven't been told a whole lot. I don't know what they think of those players other than James Flanagan. Do they want to go to the portal for depth at tight end to protect themselves over injuries? Do they want to go to, or do they keep an eye out for if there's a dude in the portal that's proven, do we go there? It's kind of similar to the wide receiver conversation, Trevor. I look at it like this. If you've got good coaching between Cooper Flanagan, James Flanagan, Ian Premer, Jack Larson, and Preston Frizzell, you should be able to find and develop a number 1. And you've got a solid number 2 rotation type of guy there in Ty Washington. I kind of like the room where it's at if everybody comes back. I don't know that this is a position where I would spend money, but I kind of thought that last year too, and they still went out and got Ty Washington. Like, I look at it, like, was Ty Washington really that much better what Jack Larson could have been? I don't know. They thought so. So it comes down to what do they think of the room with Raritan gone? And that's going to determine whether or not they go somewhere else. I personally would like to see them use their portal revenue and options and time on other positions, as long as you feel comfortable with the health of the room. That's always the big thing. There may be injuries at positions or concerns about the future of injuries of positions that we don't know about that factor into why are they going after a guy at that position. And then we find out in the spring, oh, by the way, so-and-so has been having some chronic issues with his shoulders or something like that. I literally just made that up. I'm making a point. So that's why I always leave the possibility that it might make sense to go there. And tight end is a position where if you're not confident that Cooper Flanagan can come back healthy and be the guy that you think he can be, I don't know that you can just trust that Flanagan and James Flanagan, Ian Premer, and Jack Larson and Preston Frizzell can become that number 1 type of all-around tight end that you had this year. I don't know that you have that you can guarantee that you have that if Cooper Flanagan can't get healthy. I think Cooper Flanagan, if he's healthy and you trust that he's healthy, gives you at least a baseline of what you can be. And then if the younger guys come along, then you're really good. Does that make sense? And that's why I look at the tight end position as a potential position to look at.
The tight end position is fascinating when you start talking about the portal and what they're going to do. And I think we're going to get a lot more clarity on it over the next month or so. Like I said, the portal hasn't opened yet. There could be some players that declare. Who knows? Who knows what happens with Eli Raritan? I'm with you there. The most difficult task for the tight end room when you start talking about the transfer portal is it's just going to have to be a proven commodity guy. I would argue skill-wise, you're not going to go find somebody in the transfer portal that has more just talent than Cooper Flanagan, James Flanagan, Jack Larson, Ian Premer, and Preston Frizzell. Like, just from a talent perspective. So you're going to have to try to find a proven commodity that's not just – I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. That's not like just a proven commodity because he racked up a bunch of numbers in Conference USA. It's like, hey, look what he did. Look at the numbers he put up last season. He's like, yeah, but you put him in a room next to all of those guys that I listed out. Like, where does he stand? So, yeah, he has a lot of production. So that's going to be the hardest balance for tight end in the transfer portal, which I find very fascinating. But I'm with you. When you look at it from just a talent, like, I think the next guy is in the room. The thing going for Notre Dame, I mean, the thing going for Notre Dame is the fact that every tight end one that has stepped up really over the last couple seasons didn't have experience as the tight end one in the previous season. So that's something that is going for Notre Dame.
Yep.
That's a pretty good track record that I'm willing to lean on. But again,
but you had to do that in the past. That's what I was saying earlier. Like, are they willing to take that risk or not?
Exactly.
I would, as long as Cooper Flanagan is healthy. I would literally roll with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
I would.
Absolutely.
The reason I say Cooper Flanagan's health is important because you lose Cooper Flanagan, now James Flanagan's the only traditional Y on your roster.
Mm-hmm.
If something happens to him, you're screwed. You know what I mean? Like, he's the only other guy that you're going to feel good about lining up in blocking 9 techniques all day, like Eli did at times. Whereas if you have Cooper and James, you've got 2 of those guys and you can still use them together. So if they don't think Cooper can play because of the injury, then I think you might have to go for at least a blocking tight end in the portal to give you depth. But if Cooper you think is good, I like the talent because either Cooper gives you the baseline, Ty is what he is. I'm saying, okay, we're gonna give all these reps that Eli got last year to James Flanagan and let him develop. But again, it goes back to what's this new group's, the staff's thought process going to be. I also don't think that like James Flanagan and Cooper Flanagan are going to be demanding like large NIL deals and large, deals to stay because they don't have the experience. I mean, James Flanagan's It's a legacy recruit. You know what I mean? So maybe save a little bit of that and use it on other positions. That's where I'm at. So I'm very curious to see how the staff handles tight end. If the tight end, it's funny. If they go out and get a tight end, it's going to make me nervous about the tight end position next year.
Yeah, same.
Because it's going to tell me that they don't trust the guys coming up.
Well,
that's just like my read on it.
Yeah, bro, same. Like it's like the same conversation we had this time last season about the quarterbacks. It's like if they don't go out and get a portal quarterback, then we know that the next guy is in that room. And we know that they're trusting the development of CJ, Kenny, or Steve. The same thing kind of with the tight end. Now, obviously not as magnified because tight end is quarterback's a different animal than tight end. But I'm with you. I think if they do elect to go out and get the tight end, it's going to tell me one of two things. One, they had some sort of impact loss that they weren't expecting, or maybe were expecting and kind of got their ducks in a row beforehand, or they don't trust the development in that room.
Or the health of the room.
Health.
Right. Yep. If they pass on tight end, if they just look, here's the deal. You kick the tires on every position. You do your due diligence everywhere. Yeah. You have to, because you may think his kid's coming back, and then January 1st, the kid's like, you know what, screw it, I'm going in the portal, and then you haven't done your homework on every position. Like, you need to do your due diligence. But if we don't hear anything more than kicking the tires on tight ends, that's actually get me excited about the tight end room next year, because it tells me that A, they think Cooper's going to be healthy, and then B, they think between James Flanagan, Jack Larson, and then the incoming freshman, including the best tight end in high school football last year, Ian Premer, that they feel that we're pretty good there. That's what I'm hoping that we see, because that means Cooper Flanagan is also healthy for next year. I think his setback and them not going to the playoff could end up being a little bit of a blessing in disguise for Cooper Flanagan. Because you wonder if they would have maybe tried to rush him back and get him ready and the potential setbacks. And now it's like, nope, he's going to be able to just get healthy and get ready for the spring. That's going to be very interesting. Very interesting.
All I have to say, me 11 tight ends. I'm really hoping that at some point a tight end gets in the end zone. The starting tight end gets in the end zone in 2026. Poor Eli Raridan, just week in and week out. His odds on FanDuel to score a touchdown were like plus 240, which are relatively favorable odds. And unfortunately, after the end of each Saturday and one Sunday, failed to get into the end zone. But I think Irish Gordy not put something in the chat that I thought was interesting. He was like, Eli Raridan might be one of the most impactful pass catchers in Notre Dame history that didn't score a touchdown last year. And I don't disagree. I mean, it's crazy to think about, man. Yeah. But I'm just hoping that tight end one gets in the end zone next year. That's top of the wish list.
It's going to have to be like some FanDuel odds or something next year that like has whether or not Notre Dame starting tight end will score a touchdown in 2020.
Gotta be, man. Gotta be. Let's talk about another position, Brian. This one's a different discussion than tight end in a way. How about quarterback? What would you do here talking about the transfer portal?
And even if Teddy Gerard reclassifies to 26, I'd contemplate a veteran quarterback in that room. Not someone who's going to come in and battle CJ, just a veteran quarterback, a MAC player, an Ivy League player, a veteran guy that wants to maybe get into coaching that can go get you out of a ball game if the need arises. A guy that if CJ goes down for 2 games, you put into the lineup. CJ goes down for the season at some point in time, you may then just transition to a younger player. But those are things that I would at least kick the tires and see if there's a veteran out there. All the while letting him know, listen, if Blake Hebert has a great offseason, we're not afraid to move him up to number 2. If Noah Grubbs or Teddy Gerard has a great offseason, we have no problem moving them up to number 2. You're going to have to compete for that number 2 job, but we like where you're at. We think you add something to the room. We think you add a veteran presence to the room. We think you can help bring along those young guys and take some of that leadership burden off of CJ, because I don't want CJ to be in a position yet where he's kind of got to coach up the young guys. When CJ worried about CJ and the other players, bringing a veteran guy who can kind of be that arm around the shoulder type of guy for the young guys. Absolutely. That's what I would look at. And there's actually more guys like this out there than you'd think. I mean, there's a lot of teams signed backup quarterbacks last year. There's plenty of guys like that that I think would be good for the room. It's not someone who, if CJ Carr goes down, this guy's going to get you through 10 games and take you to the playoffs. I don't know that guy's out there because that guy's going to want to be a number one, or you're going to have to pay him a lot of money to be a number two. But I at least would see if there's a guy out there like that.
Yeah. The best comparison that I can use, and I mean this with the utmost respect, go find you a Steve Angeli in the portal. Like, honestly, like Steve was somebody who we even talked about in 2024. If, God forbid, something happened to Riley Leonard for a game, which we saw in spurts, Steve Angeli could come in and lead a drive. He could get you out of the game. But we also said in 2024, if Riley were to go down for the end of the season. So you remember after the Northern Illinois injury, there was a lot of talk about, hey, is he going to be able to finish the year? Where do they go? We were under the assumption that they should play CJ Carr. He is the future. And that's kind of how I view the state of the room in this going into 2026 is you have CJ Carr, you have your bona fide starter. Blake Hebert may or may not be ready to come in and get you out of the game. Like if it's a top 25 matchup and CJ has a concussion and he can't come back in for the rest of the game. I don't know if I would trust, probably by that point in time I could. But as things stand right now, I don't know if I would trust Blake Hebert to come in and then just effectively run the offense and be the guy to get you out of the game. You would want a Steve Angeli type, like what we saw in the Orange Bowl against Penn State. He came in, led a 2-minute drive. They put points on the board. You need that type of quarterback. However, if CJ does go down, God forbid, with a season-ending injury, I would then turn the keys over to Blake Hebert because he is the next guy in line. So that's how I look at it.
Or if Noah Grubbs or Teddy Gerard, should he reclassify, which is not a given yet, do that, then yeah, in that case I would.
Yep, absolutely. That's how I view the discussion at the quarterback room. Couldn't agree more. If there's a veteran presence, somebody that can get you out of the game.
And for me, it's a kick the tires type of situation. I'm not saying this is a must-have. I'm saying I'm open to the right guy if he's out there. Totally. If he's not, then Gino Guidugli, keep coaching up the talented kids you have because you do have a talented room. Mm-hmm. And it's just an experience room. I think when the news came out that Notre Dame was talking to Teddy Gerard about reclassifying, I think there was an assumption from some that meant they weren't high on Blake Hebert or Noah Grubbs. I don't believe that to be true based on my conversations. I think this is more of we think if CJ Carr does next year what we think CJ Carr is going to do, there's a chance that CJ Carr's a top 5 draft pick in the 2027 NFL draft. If that happens, we want all our quarterbacks that are going to fight for the job the next time to be on campus and experienced enough to be in that. That means Noah Grubbs has a year under his belt in the system, Teddy Gerard has a year in the system, and Blake Hebert has 2. I don't think this is a guarantee that they think Teddy will be that guy. I think they think he has a chance to be that guy, which is why they recruited him and why they brought him on. But I think they understand if Teddy is that guy, he's going to be further along by being in the school for a year, developing in our program, running scout team every day, as opposed to playing on his high school team. And then be here in the spring and have a chance to fight. I think they view all 3 as capable of winning that job. They just want all 3 to be able to put their best foot forward. Does a transfer slow that down? That's the other question that they have to ask. Does a transfer take away some of the number 2 reps from a Blake Hebert, from a Noah Grubbs or a Teddy Gerard, whoever wins that job, from being prepared to then go be that guy the next year? So you had a great point about a Steve Angeli type of player, a guy that can come in and get you out of a game. But you also have to think, well, wouldn't it benefit if you think Blake Hebert's the next guy or Noah's the next guy for him to come in that situation and get those opportunities in the game and to get all those number 2 reps in practice? That's the battle that the Notre Dame staff has to decide. I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. I would say if you can find a veteran guy that's willing to come in, compete for number 2, but be totally fine if he doesn't win number 2, but be a veteran presence in the room, help bring the young guys along from a mentorship standpoint in a way that only players can. There's a very important role that good coach will tell you. You'd see this with Harry Hiestand. We talk about, what we think of him. You'd see this with him. where his veteran lineman would be talking to younger linemen about things, and he'd let them do it because he wanted that. He wanted the veterans to take that ownership. I don't know that I want CJ to be in that situation next year. And I think a guy could help in that role. But if you think it's going to stunt the development of your younger players, you almost kind of have to say no and take that chance. So that's where I'm at with quarterback. And then I think the other interesting one is running back. Let's work with the assumption that Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are gone. I would also say let's work with the assumption that Jabron Payne goes in the portal as well. If that happens, Trevor, you're sitting there and you've got basically 5 running backs on your roster next year, including 2 freshmen. You've got Aeneas Williams, Keidron Young, Nolan James Jr., Javian Osborne, Jonas Walton. My personal opinion, as long as Keidron's making good progress on his knee injury, I'm going with that 5. You got 5 running backs that can be your number one and be your dude. Like literally 5. That's not a position I give really any iota about needing depth or experience. However, if you're not comfortable with where Keidron's knee injury is right now, or if one of your current players not named Payne, Price, or Love jumps in the portal, then you do have to look at other running backs. But as long as everybody that we think can come back or comes back does come back, this is a position I'm comfortable with where they are. The only thing I would consider is if there's a veteran guy out there that can be a special teams player, can be a leader in the room, a Max Hurleman, a Jake Tefelsky type of guy. Those are kind of the portal guys I'd look at running back. If they all 3 of the Williams, Young, and James come back. As long as all 3 of those come back, the only type of running back I'd look at in the portal is a veteran, like a Max Hurleman was 2 years ago, like a Jake Tefelsky, kind of a sort of a walk-on-ish type of guy that's going to play a bunch of special teams and be a leader in that room. Other than that, I think they're good. But I think you'll see Notre Dame kick the tires on some running backs just in case somebody up and surprises them and jumps in the portal. That's where I think the running back is when it comes to the portal. As long as the status quo remains the same, I think they're good. If there's any kind of injury or any kind of somebody leaves that you're not expecting, then I think you have to look at the portal. Otherwise, I'm looking for, because I think Max Hurleman and Jake Tefelsky brought so much value to this roster the last couple of years. From a leadership special team standpoint, they were never challenging for snaps at running back, but they were great assets to the program. If you can find me some guys like that, I'd look at it. But if you lose a guy, now you have to be like, let's see who's jumped in the portal could come and be the guy. Because and I'm talking about Aeneas Williams. Let's just put it out there. I'm talking about Aeneas Williams. As long as Aeneas decides to come back, I think they're set at running back. But if Aeneas is like, I'm not guaranteed to be the guy next year, and he leaves, I think you then have to go to the portal. I don't think you can just go into next season with Keidron coming off a knee injury, Nolan James Jr., 2 freshmen, and be like, we're good. You might be. That's 4 talented guys. But I think you'd need that 5th guy. And you'd have to keep your eyes open for what's out there. If Aeneas comes back, I feel like Notre Dame is pretty set at running back. And unless they're getting a sort of a depth guy, then I think that's where they're going to look at running back.
You and I see that the same. I'm very interested to see what they do with running back as well, because look, over the last couple seasons, there's been a running back that we expected to be in the rotation get hurt in the offseason. Last year it was Keidron Young. The year before that, it was Jabron Payne. The year before that, a couple years before that, like Jadarian Price got hurt. So I could see them maybe wanting to give themselves like a little bit of a cushion. And not saying that they're going to go try to find some like top end guy. Like I know like CJ Baxter's in the portal. I know they're not going to try to come and get him to South Bend. It's just, to your point, an experienced veteran that adds depth. I could absolutely see that. But like you've also said too, the internal battle that the coaching staff is going to have is you've said many times, and I agree that running back is not really a position where you value but have they played 2 years in college ball?
Right.
Like that one's just, I'm with you.
If you're going to the portal for a running back because of a lack of experience, I got to question your thought process at running back. I honestly, that's one position receiver's another. I just don't care a lot about experience. It doesn't need the same level of technical or grown man strength development type of thing that you need at line, tight end, quarterback, D-line, linebacker. If you got the chops, you got the chops. I just want to make sure it's clear with people. We're not saying Aeneas is going to leave, folks. Do you hear what I'm saying? We're saying you have to at least you have to have a plan in case he does, because he did almost transfer last offseason. That's pretty known. I would think he's going to come back knowing he's got a chance to be number one. But you went from playing a bunch as a freshman to not playing at all as a sophomore with a new position coach. I don't know where the relationship between him and Jaywan Sider is. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I don't know. And I'd be a little nervous about that. So you have to be prepared. If, let's say he goes into his exit meeting and they're like, look, man, we like you, but, you're going to have to battle with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And he doesn't think it's dude, I don't think I'm going to get a shot to play. Or I think they're going to go with somebody else. Man, you're going to have to battle, but you're a good player. We love you, but you're going to have to hold off these 2 incoming freshmen. Like, hold on a second. Like, this guy who didn't recruit me here, I don't know he's going to give me a shot. I'm not saying those things happen. I'm saying we don't know that they haven't happened. We don't know that they have. I'm simply saying these are the scenarios that go into whether Notre Dame does or does not go to the portal. This isn't a defense of Aeneas Williams. This isn't saying he's not a good player. I'm saying this is the reality. You have to prepare for if you're Notre Dame. And this is what could happen depending on the situation. If status quo remains the same, I think Notre Dame's loaded at running back. But if it doesn't stay the same, you've got to be, let's say the rehab for Kedron Young has not gone well. I haven't heard that it hasn't gone well. I'm just making an example. Then now you may have to think about, do we need another guy? Do we need a bigger back? Do we need there's all those things have to go into it. It's not as simple as like, well, on paper, this is here and, guys coming back. So it's all good. I hope so. But this is a different era. We have to be prepared for that.
Folks, that is going to do it for part 2 of today's show, but don't go anywhere.
I do want to talk about the offensive line real quick, Trevor.
Oh.
There's a lot of talk about Notre Dame might lose some linemen. I'm pretty much guaranteeing you that Notre Dame's going to lose some offensive linemen. They kind of have to. Right now, with all the guys that come back that have eligibility left, there's 22 offensive linemen on the roster. That's too much. Usually you're like around 16 to 18. There will be some guys that leave, some guys that surprise us, some guys that don't. As long as that number's not more than 4 or 5, really more than 4, portal is not a place where the Notre Dame staff is going to be looking to add. But in a portal conversation, I think at least, and sorry for not writing this down, Trevor, on the overview, this is at least a position that you have to be prepared for as a Notre Dame fan, that you're going to lose some players. And for the Notre Dame coaching staff standpoint, they need to lose some players. There's too much young talent emerging at certain spots. There's too much money being offered to certain players that you're like, I won't say it. I think everybody knows who I'm talking about. I've heard from 4 or 5 different sources that there's a player on the roster now that was offered 7 figures to walk for a year. And if that's true, I would support the Notre Dame coaching staff saying, hey man, we love you to come back, but we can't match that. And then move on to a younger, more talented player who's going to cost you a lot less money. I would support that decision. Now, the difficulty for the staff is, what do you do with guys like Billy Shrouth and Ashton Craig? 2 guys that when they've played are really, really good. But they're also guys that each of the last 2 years have missed at least 4 games each. Like, that's some of the difficulty that I think the Notre Dame staff has. We'd love to have them back, but how much can we offer them? And if another school's willing to overpay, what do you do? I don't envy the Notre Dame coaching staff and the Notre Dame front office for the decisions they're going to have to make along the offensive line this offseason. I don't.
No, I would also put, and I love him, and I hope to see him work out in the blue and gold. But another player I would add to that list, along with Billy Schrauth and Ashton Craig, is Charles Jagasaw. Now, because of his limited playing, I don't think that he's at the liberty. This is just me personally. I don't think he's at the liberty of demanding a lot of money. Like I don't think that he's going to be demanding what others are getting offered, like in the millions or anything like that.
Who's that?
Charles Jagasaw. But I'm saying I would also put him in that conversation with Billy Schrauth and Ashton Craig's like, what do you do with him? I mean, he's going to come back. Right. He's going to eat up some cap space.
Right.
And it's like,
you bring him back, but how much can you count on him to be healthy enough to play? Right.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting one with Schrauth, Craig, and Jags. So very interested to see how all of that unfolds. And I know what I would do in that scenario. Like there's one for sure that I think I would pay to come back. Like one for sure. But I'm very interested to see what the staff goes in that direction. So
I think you fight like crazy to keep Anthony Knapp and Gerby Lambert.
Yep.
I would say you fight like crazy to keep one of Schrauth or Craig. If it comes down to a bidding war. I hope that both come back.
Sure.
I do. I don't know that I don't know that I would fight to keep Emil Wagner. I just don't think his game progressed at all this year. And if he's getting big offers, I kind of think that solves a problem for you as a staff that might not be received by some. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Agreed completely. Well, folks, that is going to do it for part 2 of today's show here in the Irish Breakdown podcast. But before we move on to part 3, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part 3 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're talking about the Notre Dame defense and special teams kind of at the end of this segment. And we are sticking with the trend of talking about portal needs. Very similar to the offensive side of the ball, folks. We're not talking about specific players that they should go out and get in the portal. This is more looking internally at Notre Dame and what some of their needs are based on the roster current state. Now, things are subject to change. The portal doesn't open until January 2nd. There will be names outside of the program and then obviously names within the program of people who are going to be jumping into the portal. We don't know what those are. So as of today, on December 15th, we're working on the assumption that if the roster maintains where it's at right now, what are some areas that they should dip into the portal? And it's a very interesting conversation with this defense. I think it's a little bit more interesting. It's not, well, maybe not interesting isn't the best word. It's not as cut and dry as the offense because the defense rotates so much. Like unlike on offense where you just have your starting boundary or you have your starting offensive line, on defense, you rotate a bunch of guys on the D line. They've historically rotated a bunch of guys at linebacker and on the back end of the defense as well. So much more of a different conversation because numbers-wise, you put out that scholarship chart on boards.irishbreakdown.com. I was taking a look at that last night and then made a spreadsheet with some stuff earlier this morning. So very interesting to take a look at the numbers of what Notre Dame has coming back. The interesting thing about this entire conversation, Brian, is it goes back to our point in point 1. This has nothing to do with talent. Like, does Notre Dame have to go to the portal to get more talented guys? That is not an issue that they have, especially not on defense. I mean, the defensive roster is extremely loaded. But what do you do? What do you do with some of those key positions? And I think that's a very interesting conversation for this defense.
You could argue that there's really only one position at all that you could benefit from adding a starting caliber player like in the portal.
Yeah.
And that would be D tackle and nickel. And we'll talk about those two positions. But even then it's like, there's some guys that I'm like, man, I'm kind of ready to see this guy get a bunch of reps and coach this guy up. Like we said, similar things, but like, oh, can you improve on Christian Gray? Yeah, sure. I don't know that there's a guy out there in the portal that's going to be better than Christian Gray. Like if Christian Gray jumped in the portal, I'm telling you right now, he'd be one of the most coveted portal cornerbacks in the country because coaches view him a lot differently than fans do. You know what I mean? Like that's the reality of that situation. You know what I mean? Like if Adon Schuler jumped in the portal, like he'd be the biggest name in the market. You know what I mean? Like same with Tate Johnson, same with Drake Bowen at middle linebacker, same with Jaden Osbury at will linebacker, like same with Bubakar at defensive end, same with Bryce Young or Josh Burnham. Like if those guys jump in the portal, they would be just like, whoa, we got to go get that guy. So there's just not a lot of needs for that type of player. I do think there are some questions about depth. I think there are two positions where I think the staff has to make some decisions. And that leads us to our first position group, Trev, which is defensive tackle. I think this is a position you have to look at. If there's another Jared Dawson out there, you go get him. What I wonder is, so like right now out of the gate, you look for top tackles. There's one guy already in the portal that I would look at, honestly, and that's the kid from Wake Forest. So like we'll mention kids that are there if they're in the portal. We don't mind talking about them. I don't know that Notre Dame is looking at him just yet. Like I said, the process hasn't even opened up yet, but he's at least a guy that I would consider looking at. Had a good year this year for Wake Forest. I think he fits sort of the Jared Dawson mold. He's not a given. He doesn't have Jared Dawson's experience. He doesn't have his grown man strength. He's a second, third year player, but he's at least a guy that I would keep an eye on. But for me, if I'm looking at defensive tackle right now, I think you have to look for guys that are like kind of proven, established guys that can be difference makers. Like that's where I think you need to be. The one thing about the kid, Mateen Ibaragba, that's in there from Wake Forest is I think he's a guy that brings some of the element that Jared Dawson did. He had, I think, 20 something. Let me look it up real quick. I looked at it before. 26 pressures this past year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty decent amount for an interior guy. He's built similarly to Jared Dawson, 6'3", 295, 300-ish. He'd be a guy that I'd look at, but it's got to be a high-level guy, in my opinion, Trevor. I love what Elijah Hughes did, but you don't need to bring in an Elijah Hughes this year because you still have Elijah Hughes for another year. You know what I mean? Like, you've already got – that's not an insult to Elijah Hughes. It's like you've already got him because right now, you look at the depth chart, you've got Donovan Heinisch coming back. You've got Elijah Hughes coming back. You've got Armel Mukam coming back. You've got Cole Mullins coming back. You've got Sean Sevillano coming back. Davion Dixon coming back. You've got Gordy Solstead coming back, who I think has a very high upside, but is next year going to be the year where he taps into that? Will it be more 2027 since he missed the senior year of high school? And then, of course, you've got Tiki Hola and Elijah Golden coming in. So there's a lot of talent there, but not a lot of proven talent anyone above 275, 285 pounds. So like that's the question you have to look at. I personally would look in the portal for if there's an impact defensive tackle in the portal, I would look there. A guy that's proven, a guy that like a Jared Dawson type of guy. I would look there. But I'm not, some people pointed to John Walker. John Walker's a different type of player from UCF. He's 6'3", 325. He's a guy that I would look at. Again, now all these guys have to be fits, and I don't know if they're fits at Notre Dame. But I would look at a guy like that. I'm not taking because the thing about John Walker is he's not going to be a huge producer, but he's a big boy at 6'3", 325. So there are some guys in the portal already that I would look at. But I think it's primarily number one because I really want to see guys like Armel Mukam, Davion Dixon, Sean Sevillano, Tiki Hola, Elijah Golden, Cole Mullins. I want to see those guys really get a shot to be developed this offseason. So I'm okay bringing in one D tackle. I don't know that I'd bring it back two unless you're going to lose somebody. The other thing, too, is it's not a given that Jason Onye is not going to come back next year. I believe that he's going through – so I've been told – I don't know this for a fact, but I've been told that he's looking to try to go through an appeals process to try to be granted a next year of eligibility. If that happens, then I'm even less inclined to go to the portal at D tackle. Because no, you don't have anyone currently on the roster that's definitely going to be able to replace Jared Dawson, but I got a couple guys that I think might have a chance. I mean, I've talked to multiple people that have been like, there's been some NFL scouts that have come to practice and be like, who's this number 88? But he's still raw. Coach him up. You know, I kind of feel here like I do about wide receiver. You know, if Chris Burgess ends up being 295 by the time we get to March, do you move him inside and let him become a Riley Mills type of guy? I think there's some options there. So if I'm going to go to the portal at D tackle, it needs to be a dude. It needs to be a dude. That's what I think the need is. It's one of those guys that you just can't pass up. Not a solid depth guy, but a guy that you're like, dude, that guy comes in and he makes this room better right now. So, yeah, if there's a Jared Dawson or better type out there, go get him. Other than that, I'm personally kind of in the coach these kids up mode and let's see what they can do.
I'm very interested to see what this coaching staff decides to do in the portal with defensive tackle. I mean, look, the last 2 seasons, Notre Dame has had a very veteran presence along the interior. In 2024, they had Howard Cross and Riley Mills. This past season, up until Gabe Rubio got hurt, their rotation consisted of essentially 3 fifth-year seniors and then Jared Dawson, who was, Donovan Heinisch, who was also a senior. And so very interested to see what they do along the interior. I love the talent. There, I'm with you completely. The thing that just makes me nervous, and I'm an Armel Mukam guy too. I've been riding the Armel Mukam train since he got to South Bend. I love Armel. The thing that just makes me nervous is now it's like, okay, is this the time that the coaching staff actually decides to let him loose? We've been hearing a lot of the good stuff. NFL scouts going and seeing him in fall camp, asking who this 88 guy is. Like, he's put on good weight. But we're also still talking about a guy that this season still only played 69 snaps. Is this a season that the defensive line coach and the defensive coordinator actually decide to let him loose this year?
Yeah.
I hope so. I really hope that it is. I mean, same thing with Cole Mullins. He's somebody that he got injured his first year in South Bend. And then this, in the offseason, they moved him back to the outside where he looked pretty natural. Now he's back on the interior. Is this going to be a year where he does? Because fact of the matter is, Notre Dame, as things stand right now, working on the assumption that Jason Onye doesn't come back. I hope that he does, because that would, to your point, solve a lot of the problems and a lot of the questions on the interior of the defensive line. But if not, you're relying on a 6'2", 277-pound guy and a 6'3", 300-pound guy. Elijah Hughes came in and immediately started playing more snaps than what Armel Mukam did, with comparable experience coming into 2025. It's not like Elijah Hughes was a 300-snap guy at USC, then came in and became a part of the rotation. He had like 80 snaps all year at USC, right, and then came in and started taking snaps, had more snaps than Armel Mukam. So that's how I look at the defensive line, the defensive tackle specifically. It's like, over the last 2 seasons, there's been guys where we've been talking about, it's like, hey, keep an eye out for this guy. He could become a part of the rotation. Now those guys are the ones that have moved up into, okay, this is just the rotation. How do they manage that? Are they going to? I'm also with you. I think that if there's that top end game changer that can come in and be a starter for you out of the portal, or if not a starter, play starter level snaps. Defense, I'm not really as concerned about like the starter on the depth chart with how much they rotate.
You make so many great points, but like, Trev, this is the reason why I would like to see them not go to the portal as much at certain positions. Totally. Because, hey, Al Washington, you've done a phenomenal job the last 2 years. Here's what I want you to do now. I want you to coach the heck out of Armel Mukam, Tiki Hola, Davion Dixon, Eli, you know what I mean? Coach the heck out of Lauren Lando. You're going to earn your money this year by getting Will Black, Matty Augustine, Armel Mukam, Cole Mullins, Chris Burgess, guys like that really ready to go. Because here's the thing, if you are going to take your chances on guys like that who are talented players, not projects with little talent that we're hoping can become the next Chris Smith in the defense, meaning I loved getting Chris Smith in 2020. He was a really nice rotation player that could give you some big boy snaps at nose. I'm not talking about guys that are going to be that. I'm talking about guys that can become the next Riley Mills, the next Howard Cross, guys like that. They just got to be coached up and given that opportunity. If you develop those players, that's a lot of money you're saving there that you can then use on keeping all your top players that you want to keep. And then the position or two that you really need to get a guy on the roster you can go get. And so that's why I think defensive tackle is an interesting one, and why I would only focus on one, because then that's, if there's that one guy out there that can really move the needle, the fewer portal guys you go get, the more money you can spend on that one player to be a difference maker. Because my thing is we keep talking about how good of a recruiting job Marcus Freeman has done since he got here. At some point in time, you've got to be willing to trust those kids to be the next in line. And, they've done that in the secondary, done that at safety, done that at corner. They went out and got guys that could kind of give you a bridge. But once Tay Johnson was ready to go, it was his time. You know what I mean? But you still went out and got Jalen Stroman, and that's where I'm at D tackle. That's why it would only take one. Bring that guy in, but if Armo Mookum beats him out, then Armo Mookum beats him out. That's life. And that's kind of where I'm at. Is I understand the desire to bring in a veteran guy for that bridge, but at some point in time, in a lot of those instances, your younger guys have actually been better. And you wonder, I think Jalen Stroman did a lot of nice things in Notre Dame, but I think Jalen Stroman gave Chris Ash and the staff an excuse not to play Tay Johnson right away and have to live with his mistakes that a young guy's going to make because you had this veteran player there. Well, if the veteran player wasn't there, think of all the extra reps Tay Johnson would have got in fall camp and first game of the year against Miami, and maybe we're having a different conversation, right? So that's the give and take. But when Tay Johnson got hurt later in the year, sure nice to have a guy like Jalen Stroman to turn to. So there's that give and take at the position, and that's why these are not easy decisions. It may sound like it sometimes when we talk about it, but these are not easy decisions. And that's the issue that, look, we're in this win now mode as coaches. We have to go out there, and if we can get someone that's more proven than this guy, we have to go do that. I understand that desire, but I'm also don't forget who you say you are. Because if you're going to say you're about high school development, at some point in time, you have to trust your coaches at all positions to develop high school kids. That includes, like quarterback, they did that, right? They didn't have a guy in Freeman's first couple of years that they felt was ready to be the guy. And so they went to the portal, got Sam Hartman, got Riley Leonard. But then last year said, nope, we're going to take a chance because we think between CJ, Kenny, and Steve, we got somebody that's going to step up and emerge. Are they willing to do that at wide receiver? Are they willing to do that at D tackle? Are they willing to do that at a couple other positions? Tight end, running back. I hope that they are. And then they can focus on maybe a smaller amount, go out and get an elite D tackle, go out and get an elite wide receiver, go out and get an elite kicker. For the love of all things holy, spend all your portal money on getting the best kicker in college football. That's where I'm at. But I also am not to the point where if there's a dude out there D tackle, I think you'd be a fool to not look at him and talk to him and see if he's a fit also. And then still develop those other young guys. You bring in two, that makes it a lot harder to develop everybody that needs to be developed. That's where I'm at.
Well, I think that's extremely well said. I agree with all those sentiments. There's always a rub to everything. And that's kind of the battle that they have at wide receiver and at defensive tackle. But again, I always draw back to what we talked about in part one of today's show, Brian. You can't just, not you personally, but you can't be naive enough to think that all of the 14 scholarship wide receivers that you have or the 20 scholarship defensive linemen that you have are just going to sit around and wait forever until their redshirt junior, redshirt senior year to finally be given their opportunity to play. Definitely an interesting task at hand, and one that I'm honestly happy that I don't have to deal with. I'm happy that I could just talk about it on the outside looking in. That's for sure. Similar to the offensive side of the ball, Brian, there are a couple of other positions that, we think the staff might be interested in taking a look at. One of them you already mentioned, and that was at nickel. How do you kind of handle this? Because, again, you have talent at the position. Top of the roster probably has to be Dallas Golden. I know they flirted with the idea of trying out some others. You have some incoming freshmen that might have the opportunity to be in that rotation at nickel. But when you talk about the transfer portal and the nickel position in Notre Dame's defense, where do you kind of start?
With decisions. Do you feel right now that your depth is good enough to say we're definitely going to turn it over to the younger players? Or do you feel like we're a year away from having the depth that we want? and bringing in a veteran to say it's kind of like what you did at safety. Each of the last 2 years, Notre Dame brought in a safety that was expected to be the guy at safety, and he was going to be a bridge to a younger player. The first guy they brought in wasn't – and both times those guys weren't there in the spring. And both times a younger player emerged. First year, 2024, it was a Don Schuler. So they brought in I'm drawing a complete blank. Number 2, the kid from Northwestern. I cannot believe I'm drawing a blank.
Ooh, I am too. It's not Thomas Harper. Give me a second.
No, it was. I can't believe that I'm looking it up. I cannot believe that I'm completely blanking out on this kid. Rod Hurd. Oh my goodness. Rod Hurd came in, did a heck of a job for Notre Dame. He was kind of everything they thought he was going to be. He was a very important part of the safety rotation, but ended up being a rotation guy, not the starter, because of the emergence of Don Schuler. This past year, it was supposed to be Jalen Stroman. And Jalen was a very important part of the rotation. I'm glad that Jalen Stroman came. But it was Tay Johnson's emergence that truly changed the safety position. And then Jalen was in that great position to where he was more of a depth guy. I think that you still kind of maybe need to be in that position in nickel right now. I think Dallas Golden is the future nickel. But what if he gets hurt? What if you need him at corner? There's all these what ifs. I don't think Carson Hobbs is a nickel. I don't know that Ben Minnick is a guy at that position where if something happens in Dallas, you're ready to turn it over to him. If you can find a nickel that can come in and start for you as a veteran, but also has the mentality where if he's just the rotation behind Dallas Golden, he's going to be okay, then I would bring that guy in. It has to be someone that's willing to compete. I'm not handing him a job. Like when Thomas Harper got signed, he was going to be the nickel because they didn't have anybody else. When Jordan Clark got signed, he was going to be the nickel because they didn't really have anybody else. When Devontae Smith got signed, he was going to be the nickel because your next best options are freshmen. Well, now those guys aren't freshmen anymore. So now it's almost like you're where you were at safety, where we think we have a guy that's the answer, but we're going to bring in a veteran to compete because competition is good. But you've got to bring in a veteran who's going to be okay and be a good team player if for some reason he's not better than Dallas Golden. And I think that's where Notre Dame is right now, Trev, of why I think that they'll have their eyes open for a nickel, but you've got to be much more careful about the type of person you're bringing in at nickel, because I think Dallas Golden's the future there. But I don't want just one guy there. Like I said, what if he doesn't develop? What if he gets hurt? What if you need him to play corner because somebody else gets hurt? That's why I think nickel's a place where I'm going to continue to keep my eyes open for the right guy. Not just player-wise, but also personality-wise, where he's going to be okay not being the guy if that's how things shake out. That's where I'm at with nickel. What say you, Trev?
You and I see that very similar. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the nickel position at Notre Dame is extremely young, talented, but young. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, people have gone on record. Chris Ash, the defensive coordinator, Mike Mickens has said it before, that nickel is, especially by how Notre Dame uses it, one of the hardest positions to play on defense. It's a heavy burden to put on, Ben Minnick, a converted safety who's had injury problems. He's academically a senior going into next year. Eligibility-wise, he'll be a junior. I don't think he took many meaningful reps, if any meaningful reps at nickel this season. I think that was really a job divvied up between Devontae Smith and Carson Hobbs and then eventually Dallas Golden. But then you get into these some of the other players that we project to go into you got Brandon Logan, who also got hurt last year, I think. Didn't Brandon Logan get hurt at some point in the offseason? So you got Brandon Logan. Eligibility-wise, he's still a freshman. He got hurt. He's a redshirt freshman. You have Nick Reddish coming in. He's a true freshman. And then obviously you have Dallas Golden, who is a true sophomore, but still young, still needs a little bit of development. There's a reason why when Devontae Smith got healthy, he stepped back into the starting lineup. That's not a slide at Dallas. You just need some development at one of the tougher positions to play on defense. I'm with you. I think a veteran presence at that position would be extremely useful. So I view the nickel position kind of how I view, like, in a way, the quarterback position. They don't have a proven commodity at nickel like the quarterback position does with CJ Carr. But you kind of need that guy to kind of get you out of a pinch. Because reality of the situation is, it would make me a lot more comfortable if they went and they got, and I'm just using this as an example. I have no idea who's in the portal at nickel corner right now. But let's say that there was a veteran guy we used Wake Forest before. He's a 2-year starter at Wake Forest, isn't going to come in and talent-wise compete with Dallas Golden. Well, what if Dallas Golden gets hurt? I'd feel a lot better about that transfer player, that veteran coming and stepping into the starting lineup than I would with Ben Minnick or a bunch of freshmen. And that's just kind of where I'm at. That's one of the reasons why they brought in Devontae Smith this past season. Dallas Golden was the future at nickel. I think the coaching staff thought that. I know Brian thought that. I thought that. But do you ask a true freshman to come in day one and just start being your nickel? I don't think so. And then that's kind of the issue that they have right now at hand. Do they balance that out? Because I am also with you. I think Dallas Golden's the future there, but what if he gets hurt? What if he doesn't take as big of that jump next season? Now, that being said, even if Dallas Golden doesn't take that big jump like we see, and I think that he will, but even if he doesn't take that big jump like we've seen so many freshmen to sophomores do at Notre Dame, it's still going to be better than the performance that we saw against Texas A&M at nickel. Still going to be better than some of the stuff we saw against Miami at nickel. But that being said, I wouldn't mind a veteran presence in that room. You and I see that very, very similarly. What about let's go back, Brian, to the defensive line. We talked a lot about the interior. Now, the edge played significantly better this year. I mean, you got Boubacar back. Bryce Young finished the season second on the team in pressures, but you're in a spot where you're losing Junior Tuialamaka. There's some question marks with some of the other edge players that you have. Do you look to the portal for some depth at defensive end? How would you go about that?
That's one where if my status quo remains the same, I'm good. I don't need anybody. If Boubacar comes back, Burnham comes back, Bryce Young comes back, Logan Thomas comes back, you've obviously got two talented players coming in next year, or coming in this year. You've got Preston Zinner, you've got Dom Hulak, you've got Chris Burgess, you've got Joe Reif, plus Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Utade coming in. If all those guys are back, most of those guys are back. But as long as Burnham, Traore, Bryce are back, I would kind of throw Logan Thomas into there as well. If those four guys are all back and playing defensive end, I'm good. I'm good. They're the bridge to Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Utade. If for some reason, and yes, Junior Tuialamaka has played 4 years at Notre Dame. He played 12 games all 4 years of his career. He's a guy that could be impacted if that new rule, let's say new rule gets passed next week and Junior decides to come back, you're even more good. But even with him and Botelho both gone, I think you're good if everybody comes back. But let's say Bryce Young puts on another 15, 20 pounds and they're like, dude, we got to move him inside and be a monster inside. Then maybe depth, but even then, you still have Boubacar, you still have Burnham, you still have Logan Thomas, you still have a guy, in Chris Burgess, who I feel very good about, his future. Dom Hulak they like, Joe Reif, Logan Thomas. But if Bryce Young has to move inside now, and Burgess has to move inside, now you're a little thin there. And I would keep my eyes open for a guy that could come in and be a rotation player at end. I mean, if you can get an elite guy opposite Boubacar, I'd look at him, but you better not just hand him the job because Josh Burnham was their best end at times in stretches this year. Like, that's my thing is I'm doing everything possible to make sure Boubacar, Josh Burnham, and Bryce Young all want to come back. And then who's developing behind those guys? Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Utade, Joe Reif, Dom Hulak, Chris Burt, you know what I mean? Like, Logan Thomas. That's where I would be with. Now, Logan Thomas you got to be careful of because he hasn't been able to stay healthy in his career at Notre Dame. Like, that's been the knock on Logan Thomas. They love him when he's healthy, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So as long as the status quo remains the same, and Coach Rouse just asked, do we want Bryce Young to move inside? I don't want Bryce Young to move inside. I'm simply, when I've seen his transformation the last couple of years, his body may just be like, dude, I'm a 300-pounder. Sorry. That's just where my body is. I don't want him to move there. But if he does, and Chris Burgess does, now you are a little bit more thin, especially past 2026. Do you bring in another guy for rotation at that point in time? Is there a linebacker that could maybe move there? Does Preston Zinner get convinced to come back and be part of that rotation? Is there another linebacker, a Tony Sacca type of guy that maybe can get up to 250, something like that? Those are things that I would keep an eye on. But I think you at least have to have a plan in case you lose someone. I mean, I expect Boubacar to come back, but what if he decides to go pro? I don't anticipate that, but what if he does? Guys have made wrong decisions before. What if Josh Burnham's like, hey, I thought I should have played more earlier. I'm not happy. I leave. What if Bryce Young outgrows the position and he moves himself? You at least have to have a plan for what you do then. But if the status quo remains the same, they're going to have one of the best defensive end rotations in all of college football next year, if not the best, between Boubacar, Burnham, and Bryce. The triple Bs, baby. You bring those three kids back next year with your best defensive end class since 2011 coming in. Also, you got Burgess, Reef, Dom Hulak, Logan Thomas, Preston Zinner. You're absolutely loaded there. But I think you at least have to mention it just in case you do have some departures. You have to be prepared for it.
Yeah, I think that's extremely fair. When I look at the defensive end rotation, I think Josh Burnham is kind of the key indicator of what I'm going to do. If he stays, I'm cool with keeping on, if I'm being honest. If he comes back, I think you have a very solid rotation. I'll be interested to see what Logan Thomas does. He kind of got a little bit of the Aeneas Williams treatment. A little bit. I mean, they played Logan Thomas played very comparable number of snaps this season. In 2024, he played 42. This past season, he played 39. But it's the moments that he played. I mean, he was playing in the playoffs last year. And then you go and you look at some of the games that he played in this year. I mean, he got 1 snap against Miami. He only got 10 against Purdue. He only got 5 against Boise State in a 21-point route. He only got 6 against Syracuse.
Part of that's because he was banged up, and part of that's because you had Boubacar and Botelho coming back.
Yep.
And he played more as a freshman in those moments. Like if Boubacar and Botelho were healthy, he's not playing against Georgia.
Sure.
And when you have that opportunity and then you kind of get injured, and he did anything wrong, he didn't do it on purpose, but you get injured and you miss that time, then it makes it harder to get that spot back.
Sure. Well,
if healthy, to your point, if healthy, you're going to now get that chance now because Junior and Botelho are gone. And you're going to get that chance because when he's healthy, this staff likes Logan a lot.
Yep. Well, and for those reasons, that's why I said that Josh Burnham is the key indicator when I look at the defensive end rotation of what I'm doing there. If he bounces, I'm going to the portal. If he stays, I'm cool. I mean, also very good point about Bryce Young and Christopher Burgess as well. That's another indicator. But biggest one for me is Josh Burnham. If he stays, I really like where my defensive end rotation is at, especially with the 2 freshmen coming in, with Ebenezer Utade and Rodney Dunham. That'll be very, very interesting to see what they do there. That's absolutely for sure. Brian, let's wrap up this discussion with special teams. And let's talk about those needs in the portal. This one, I feel like is pretty cut and dry, at least the way that I look at it. How do you view it?
I think you have to look. I don't know that we learned enough about Eric Schmidt in game moments to say he's the guy at kicker or punter next year. Right now, there's a question: is James Rundell going to be able to come back again or not? Like his eligibility is all kind of wonky because of him coming from Australia and different things. I know they're trying to get him another year. I don't know that they're going to get him another year. If he gets another year, you're there. You're good. You're fine. If he's not back, do you have Eric Schmidt handle punting, which is what he was originally recruited to do? He was great at. And then kickoff duties, do you have Eric Schmidt handle all 3? Is he really ready to step in and be all 3? Do you bring in a kicker and then let Eric Schmidt focus on punting? Do you bring in a punter, let Eric Schmidt focus on kicking? Do you bring in both and let Eric Schmidt compete with those guys? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know who's out there. I think it's a very interesting question that Notre Dame's going to have to find an answer to. I think at the very least, you have to bring in a kicker to compete. I think at the very least, you have to bring in that guy. I do. I don't know that you can just assume that Eric Schmidt's going to be that guy. If he becomes that guy, you're fine. That guy just doesn't play. The guy you bring in gets beat out. That's life, right? But if not, you have to protect yourself and go get a guy. I think this is a position where competition is going to be so important. So absolutely important.
The proven commodity piece at kicker is going to be absolutely huge. I mean, look, fact of the matter is now that the season's over, we can reflect on it, and it's Notre Dame ended the season, and for the final 6 games, they didn't make a field goal in game. Last time they made a field goal in a game was against NC State, and that was not for a lack of trying. You could argue for the last 3 games that was a lack of trying, that they weren't really trotting out the field goal unit. But, I mean, there were definitely some games in between NC State and the final 3 games, that's for sure. Selfishly, I would like for them to take a kicker because I lost out on some bets before on taking Notre Dame's over point total on FanDuel because of some missed kicks. But in all seriousness, though, a proven commodity at kicker that, like you said, the competition is going to be absolutely huge when it comes to what's going to happen there. Do you stick with Eric Schmidt? Do you let him ride and just go full bore into his development? Does Marty Biaggi go full bore into that? I'm not sure. I think that's a very, very interesting piece of this. I do have one final question about special teams, Brian. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this real quick. Do you think that they look to the portal if Jadarian Price leaves to get like a Jaden Harrison type of kick returner? Because I know there's people on the roster that could. I know there's Bubba Frazier, Braden Robinson, or a Dallas Golden. Punt returner, I'm cool with Faison. But do you get more of an experienced guy? How do you look?
I wouldn't. Okay. I wouldn't. I don't want to pay them. Look, between – and guys, I'm aware Xavier Hassan just committed. I literally just put the story in the chat. And that was the news we talked about before the show that we might talk about when news breaks. But he just committed Notre Dame. Story's already published, already tweeted out. I would not, Trevor, because I just think between the guys you mentioned, Dallas Golden – Xavier Watt. I mean, not I was going to say Xavier Watts. Bubba Frazier, Braden Robinson, Aeneas Williams, Nolan James Jr., Javian Osborne, Jonas Walton. Jaden Greathouse is also a potential punt returner should something happen to Jordan Faison. I just think there's enough big play weapons on your team that I'm not spending money for a guy that's proven it. You know what I mean? Like, this staff has made enough bad decisions with that. Like even going and getting Jaden Harrison. Like, why? When you had Jadarian Price already there. And as good as Jaden Harrison was last year, he wasn't as good as what Jadarian Price was the year before or this year. You know what I mean? Like, I got why they did it. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but I understood it. You want Jadarian just to focus on playing running back. But I just think there's enough talent already on the roster. Aeneas, just at running back alone, Aeneas, Nolan James. I mean, there's enough talent on the roster to be good there. There is. Yeah.
I'm with you. Well, folks, that is going to do it for part 3 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We are getting ready to recap Xavier Hassan's commitment to Notre Dame. 9th overall commitment in the 2027 class. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here and stay in the now, especially because it's the off season, is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, to wrap up today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we have a commitment to cover, and Notre Dame just picked up their 9th overall commitment in the 2027 class, cornerback Xavier Hassan from Raleigh, North Carolina. It's another big pickup. To the surprise of nobody, Mike Mickens stays hot on the recruiting trail. I'm really excited to cover this one, man, with all of the kind of doom and gloom that's kind of happened really ever since the regular season ended. Love covering commitments. Love seeing Notre Dame build towards the future. So, Brian, let's talk a little bit about Xavier Hassan, Notre Dame's 9th overall commitment in the 2027 class.
Well, this one's not a big surprise. Notre Dame has absolutely crushed this recruitment. This is one where Mike Mickens has been out in front of this one for a while. When you went into the 27 cycle and you started kind of who are the top targets, right away, Xavier Hassan was identified as a top target for Notre Dame. And Mike Mickens is just, the staff all over him. And they're going against heavy hitters. I mean, this is a kid, Trev, I'll just kind of, first of all, to begin, he is a guy that picked Notre Dame over Ohio State, Tennessee, North Carolina, and who was the fifth team that it was Notre Dame, Ohio State, Tennessee, Florida State. And he had a very impressive offer list. I mean, if you look at at the offers he had, not only the schools that we just talked about, Georgia offered him, Florida offered him, Miami offered him, Penn State offered him, Ole Miss offered him. Like, he's got an elite offer list. And Oregon offered, Auburn offered. Like, this is a kid that a lot of people wanted. But Mickens just kind of did his thing. And then also Marcus Freeman played a big role in this one as well. Like, they both were involved in Xavier's recruitment. He would talk about his relationship with Coach Mickens and his relationship with Coach Freeman. And I think that tells you what kind of player Xavier Hassan is that this is a guy that they tag teamed and that because Marcus Freeman said, I can't be involved in every single recruitment. It's not possible. But when he is very heavily involved, that this is a guy that they've identified as a must-get player. And Xavier Hassan is certainly that player. A big-time talent and, a guy that has been on campus, I think, 3 times in the last 6-7 months. A guy that the staff is very high on. They've been down there to see him multiple times. He's been up on campus multiple times. Just a guy that the staff was all over and felt that he was a must-get recruit. And I think they've been in front here for months, honestly. There were some other schools that made hard pushes. This was not one that you just cruised to success. Like, Notre Dame had to do their work to get this young man, and they were able to do it. He's been to, like I mentioned, he's been to Notre Dame a bunch of times, but he also visited Ohio State a week before he visited Notre Dame. So he came to Notre Dame, I think it was the Navy game. Week before that, he made a visit to Ohio State. He made in-game visits this season to South Carolina, Tennessee, Penn State. He was at the I think he was also at the A&M game. So this is a kid that I mean, they had to go after. He made summer visits to Florida, Miami. They had to put in the work. But because they put in the work all along, they've been the team to beat for a while. And that doesn't take away anything from the importance of this. This is a big-time pickup for Notre Dame. And but it's one that we expected. And I think most people in the chat that follow recruiting kind of expected. This wasn't a surprise to anybody, but it doesn't take away from how important it is. I think it speaks volumes about how good Mike Mickens is and how the recruiting development at Notre Dame has been and how the on-field production at Notre Dame has been in the secondary, that the number 27 player in the country, according to On3 Rivals, is just assumed that he's going to go to Notre Dame for months. These are not the kind of kids that Notre Dame has landed in the past. And now they're doing it. We're just like, yeah, I mean, they're probably going to get that guy. And it's kind of impressive to see what they're doing, Trevor. It really is. And it's just another reason why you absolutely 1,000% need to do whatever it takes to make sure Mike Mickens isn't going anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's been absolutely cooking on the recruiting trail, not just this class, not just in the last class, but I mean, really his impact was felt the moment he stepped foot in South Bend. But no, you're right. This is absolutely a big pickup. I mean, when we talk class impact, we mentioned it's the 9th overall recruit in the 2027 class so far. He is the, I believe, 6th defensive commitment, 3rd in the secondary. He joins Ace Alston and Khalil Terry. But
5th or 6th, depending on what ends up happening with Richie Flanagan.
Yeah.
But for right now, yeah, they've filled up on. They've got a quarterback, an offensive lineman, and a snapper. The rest are defensive players.
Right on. Yeah, right on. I mean, look, the biggest thing, we talk a lot about the different hotbeds for recruiting for Notre Dame. And the biggest takeaway that I have with this commitment is I think North Carolina continues to be a spot where Notre Dame picks up good players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, with Xavier Hassan coming from North Carolina, I mean, he joins, just in the most recent class, Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Utah were both from North Carolina. Thomas Davis Jr. was from North Carolina. Nick Reddish was from North Carolina. So there's a lot of good players that are now starting to follow that trend, and that pipeline is starting to remain strong, especially over the last couple of recruiting cycles. So that's an absolutely huge piece. And then you start talking about the fit. We've talked a lot about Notre Dame's defensive back recruiting and, hey, like this guy projects well to the nickel. His size projects well to the nickel. And I'm talking about guys like Nick Reddish or potentially a Khalil Terry or somebody like that. When I watch film, I watched film on Xavier Hassan last week because after we talked about kind of like what was next after the Ace Austin commitment, you asked if I had watched film on Xavier Hassan. I was like, not yet. So I went and checked out some of his film, and I'm excited to dive into it again here soon. But he's a really strong kid, and I think he projects really well to the boundary. I don't know if you read that the same, but he's a player that I think could fit there. And when I go through and I look at what that means for this class, I think that's a good fit. Definitely a good fit for where he belongs in the 2027 class.
It does. I agree with what you said, but I'm going to add more to it because what makes him a big time player in my view, and I talked about this in the article that I published when he committed, is I think he could be a very good boundary corner. He's got the size, strength, coverage ability to be a boundary corner. I think he's got the tackling ability, the range, the instincts, the ball skills to be a really good field corner as well. But I also think he can end up moving to safety and be the next to Don Schuler, but faster. Like, that's how good I think he can be. He's a lot like Dallas Golden defensively. Now, what he doesn't bring to the table is the offensive production that Dallas Golden brought to the table. He doesn't play offense, but he returned 4 kicks the last 2 years for scores. 3 kicks and a punt, I think, is what he's done. So this kid brings special teams value. He brings defensive value. And the reason that's important, Trevor, because if you're just kind of a boundary, well, what if there's a boundary in the class ahead of you, like, I don't know, Kari Adams, Aiden Pouncey, and then you're just a boundary guy, you're buried until that guy goes pro. Or if you're just a field guy, same story. The thing I love about Xavier Hassan is when I evaluate his film, I'm watching it. I'm like, okay, let me evaluate him as a boundary. And I'm watching, I'm like, okay, size. Oh, okay, he can play that. Well, let me evaluate him because this is how I'll do it. I'll evaluate a skill set with the thing in mind when I'm first going through film and evaluating a player. Okay, let me see if he's got boundaries tools. I watch him, Trev, to your point, like you did. And you're like, yeah, this dude can play boundary. Then I'll watch him again. Okay, let me look for the things that I need to see for him to be a good field corner. Okay, is he rangy? Is he instinctive? Can he drive on the football? Can he tackle? Is he physical enough to hold up against perimeter blocks? Can he play off coverage? Can he play tight coverage? And I watch him and I'm like, dude, he fits the field position really well also. And then as I'm watching him play field, I'm like, dude, I think this guy could play safety also. Like, I think this kid could move on the back end and be a high level cover safety because he can hit. He can tackle well enough to play safety. And what's funny is his highlights don't show the hitting ability as well as his game film does. And so I'm like, dude, this guy could play safety. And if you can do all those things, you can also play nickel and give you more of a like big nickel body. I mean, he's 6 foot, 185 pounds already. You know, and he could play slot as well with a lot of those attributes. And so one of the things I love is if he's one of your 5 best in the secondary, you find a home for him. Like, Leonard Moore's an elite player. I'm not moving him to safety. Could he play it? Yeah. Could he be a draftable player? Yeah. Is he going to be a top 15 NFL draft pick? No. Could he play field as good as he does corner boundary? Yeah. Could he play nickel? Well, he shut down the Biletnikoff winner in the slot. What I love about Xavier Hassan is depending on, like, when I watch him as a boundary, I love him in the boundary. When I watch him as a field, I love him in the field. When I watch him and think about him as a safety, I love him as a safety. And that's one of the things that makes him one of my favorite prospects in this class is because he could start and be a dude at corner, both nickel or safety. And that's something that we're like, boy, there aren't a lot of guys like that. And I think that's something that Mike Mickens loved about this kid early on is like, look, this kid can play anywhere for me. There's 2 advantages of that. Number one, if he's one of your 5 best, it makes it easier to get him on the field. It does. If he's one of your 5 best, but he's not your best boundary, guess what? You can move him somewhere else and play him somewhere else and start him. That there's a lot of value to that. Number 2, to your point about the class impact, is now you don't have to say boundaries locked down. let's say you can go out and get Josh Dobson. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, now I got him and Xavier Hassan. I can play these guys together. They don't have to play in spite of each other. They can play with each other. And now all of a sudden you start thinking about the position a little bit differently. And so that's kind of how I look at it, Trev. It's like, you know, let's say you go get a Hayden Stepp or a Josh Dobson or a John Meredith. They're not going to get John Meredith, but like, and those guys are like, no doubt about it, boundary corners. Well, guess what? Xavier Hassan can just move to field, move to nickel, move to safety, because the nickel's a starting position in Notre Dame's defense. Let's just say that the best player you get opposite him is a guy that's more of a field corner, a rangy kind of field. Cool. Xavier can go play boundary. You're good. You know, and now when I look at the class they have now, I view Xavier Hassan as sort of the boundary, nickel, maybe safety, and Ace Austin's more of that field corner. So I think as it is now, you could see that. I could also see if they go out and get a boundary guy, I could see, you know, Xavier at field and Ace at nickel, or Xavier at nickel and Ace at field and somebody else at boundary. And if you keep filling up, I could say you could move this kid to safety. That's one of the things I absolutely love about this kid. We talk about run fits. Your job in the run fit is to make the guy in front of you right. When you get a guy like Xavier Hassan, you can't miss on the rest of your guys in the class, meaning positional fits, because you can move Xavier anywhere, and he can be an impact player. So that's one of the things I love about this kid. But where am I going to start him? I'm probably going to start him off in the boundaries, probably where I start him.
I mean, look, man, we've talked a lot about the recruiting classes Mike Mickens has brought in the last couple of years, and it's kind of that almost positionless football, so to say. How many different combinations could you make in a secondary with the 2026 class? Yeah, that's one of my biggest takeaways with this. I mean, you could start them anywhere. I mean, if you needed to in a pinch, you could start Joey O'Brien at boundary. I mean, there's just so many different things that you could do, and that's what I think Xavier Hassan, overarching to your point, brings to this class. Is there's now no next like bad target to get. Like we reference all the time that Texas A&M class, you know, about it's like, yeah, you had the number one recruiting class, you brought in 5 defensive ends, you know, that all could kind of play strong side defensive end. Like, I don't really know where you're going to go from there. So definitely a lot of good, man. Definitely a lot of good with this, with this pickup.
Well, and just the thing, Trev, too, is I think when you also talk class impact, landing another absolute dude helps with putting this class together. We've said it a million times. Football is a little different than maybe basketball, and even basketball, you still see this, but I think football is just a very different animal. When you look at football, it has tended to always be, more than anything, it's the expression like, you know, dogs want to play with other dogs, right? You know, and I think that's kind of where this falls with recruiting in the high school level also, which is, hey man, I'm looking at what Notre Dame's doing, and dude, they're killing it right now. Like, they're absolutely crushing recruiting right now. They brought in this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. I'm an elite edge rusher, and I'm like, I want an elite secondary behind me. You don't think this is going to have an impact? Heck yes, it is. And then you just watch Notre Dame sign the number one class in the country according to Rivals on 3. And as I pointed out before, actually, let me see if this is still true. Yeah, so they're 0.9. So that'd be 91.7. Number 2 Alabama is closer to number 8 Texas A&M on the Rivals on 3 rankings than they are number 1 Notre Dame. There's a bigger gap between number 1 Notre Dame and the number 2 team than there is the number 2 team and the number 17. It's almost identical gap. That stuff matters, and Xavier Hassan is a big part of that for the 27 class, because he is considered one of the best players in the 27 class. He's a consensus top 100 recruit. I believe he's number 27 on Rivals on 3. He's number 55 on ESPN and number 61 on 247 Sports. You know, you're talking about a kid who's a top 50-ish caliber player. I grade him out as a top 75-ish to top 100 caliber player right now, but my system is different. I don't include upside in your current ranking. whereas the rankings do include it's all one encompassing ranking. Other players are going to see that and be like, yo, Notre Dame is doing some things, right? They are absolutely doing some things. And you're trying to get Josh Dobson, who's an elite 5-star corner from South Carolina, and you just signed a borderline 5-star corner from North Carolina that's going to be able to say, hey, man, come play with me. We got Xavier. We got Ace Austin over there who's a top 100 dude, borderline top 100 dude. We got Khalil Terry in the class who's a top 200 guy. Like, man, look at the work we're putting in. I mean, the kids love that. Kids want to play for that. So I think when you talk about class impact, I don't think we can dismiss how important it is for Notre Dame to get guys like that in their class either. I think that plays a big role. You've got one of the top quarterbacks in the country in your class. You got one of the top offensive linemen already in the country in your class. I mean, I love the work they're putting in so far. And this is probably this is your highest ranked recruit right now. Like if you're someone who just goes by recruiting services, this is the highest ranked recruit they have in the class right now, including over Teddy Gerard and all those guys. So that's a big time pickup. That's only going to make your case for other top players even stronger. And that's a very important piece to this whole thing, Trev. Very important piece. Big pickup.
That's music to my ears. I mean, we talked about them going big game hunting especially after the class that they signed this past season, kind of gives them the leverage to do so. So, and we're starting to see the fruits of that labor come in.
And that's exactly what he is. And what else do we talk about? We always talk about you know to start stacking classes back to back to back to back, right? The 25 DB class. The 24 DB class. That was a pretty good DB class. The 23 DB class, that's a pretty good DB class. I mean, you sign Christian Gray, you sign a Don Schuler, they're still there. 24 class, you go out and get Tay Johnson. He's a big part of what you're doing already. You go in the 25 class. Well, yeah, obvious. Yep, that's a pretty big one. The 25 class, you get Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, Jadon Blair, Cree Thomas, Brandon Logan, Ethan Long. Then it's 26 class. You go out there and you get Joey O'Brien, Kari Adams, Aiden Pouncey, Chaz Smith, Nick Reddish. Like, okay, so what are you going to do for 27? And now they've already got, you already got Ace Austin. You've already got Khalil Terry, two really good football players to start off with. And then you just go get one of your crown jewels in Xavier Hassan. And it's like, okay, this is just who they are now. Like they are the, like in the elite group of 3 to 4 schools that every year just landing elite DB classes year after year after year after year. And it's a huge testament to the job Mike Mickens is doing. So, I mean, I think that's what a pickup like this means. Notre Dame could get guys like Khalil Terry and Ace Austin in the past. They did. And those were some of the guys that turned out to be really good players for Notre Dame. But what's happening now is those guys are no longer your 1 and 2 in a class. I mean, no disrespect to those players. You have 5 starters. Somebody has to be the 5th best starter. You're not going to have – I mean, you could have the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. Somebody's your number 5 guy when you grade them all out. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not – but it's like in the past, those are 1 and 2. Now those are like 3 to 5.
Yeah.
And that's the difference because now you're adding the guys like Xavier Hassan on top of it. And that's what makes this thing so different and what makes what they're building in the secondary really special. Really special.
Well, Brian, I don't know about you. I am very ready to dive into film and watch a little bit of Xavier Hassan because his film is really fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So let's dive into this little film session here for Xavier Hassan. And, first thing you're going to see, Trev, is he does nothing on defense. First clip that you're going to see from Xavier Hassan on this clip is going to be of him being a kick returner. And you get to see how smooth he is athletically. He's not so much that, like, I don't know that I would call him super twitchy. He's long, he's rangy. He's got very good speed. He's smooth. And that's one of the things that I think you see that could fit very well to the boundary, but also something that I see that would fit very well to look how quickly he gets speed going there. Like, you see what I'm saying? It's not like, oh my gosh, 2 steps and he's gone, but man, he gains speed so quickly and he's a strong kid. Look how easily he kind of works through that arm tackles like it's nothing. Very long strider type of kid. That's what I like that could fit well at safety. That's what I like that could fit really well at the field position as well, is that he brings those things to the table. Now you see him a little bit at corner. Is this freezing up a little bit for you guys?
Yeah, just a tad.
Okay, let me go back here real quick. I see that. I don't know why it's doing that. So let's see if we can get this here. Give me a second, folks. I'm going to pull this out of here and bring this back up again because StreamYard started acting a little bit funky. It's not doing that on my side, like when the screen I'm watching on. It's only doing it on StreamYard. So we'll go back to this and get her going a little bit. So good old StreamYard, always letting me down. So yeah, it's going smooth on my end, Trev. I don't. It's all choppy. You guys are seeing something all choppy, right? You're seeing what
it's choppy on my end. Yeah, just a little.
Okay. All right. Let's see if it was maybe just that play.
Yeah, it's a little
looks
better
like it's good
now.
Here. Yeah, I think it might have just been that play. We'll see. Maybe the StreamYard doesn't like defense; it only likes special teams, and it's choppy again. All right, let's try something different here a little bit. Just give me a second, folks. This is not an Irish breakdown issue. This is more of a StreamYard issue. So it's looking very smooth on my end. Let me just close it out. Pull it back up here real quick.
The one thing that I'll say while we're working through some of the technical difficulties is Mike Mickens and really Notre Dame in general the last couple of seasons, but more specifically on defense, have brought in just really good football players. And it isn't very often that you see cornerbacks that look that natural with the ball in his hands. I mean, if we were just looking at Xavier Hassan's film and you didn't tell me that he was a corner, like we didn't know he was a corner, you just said, hey, look at this one clip or look at these 3 clips and it's just him returning kickoffs, I would have thought he was a receiver or running back. Looks very natural with the ball in his hands. Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens especially are sticking with the identity of bringing in just really good football players to their program. Man, I think you start to see that a little bit with the work that he's done on special teams. And then again, we're talking about a team that led the nation in interceptions this season. And I think that would also translate well with his ability as a return guy. That's for sure.
Let's see if this actually works out a little bit better. I don't know that it will. But see that range though, Trev? That's where I'm like field safety. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You see those things and you're like, dude, that kid covered a lot of ground in a hurry. Like a lot of ground in a hurry. And yeah, he can play boundary, no doubt. You need those traits to play boundary as well. But man, when I look at a kid like that, I'm like, that kid, that's also the kind of rangy kind of kid that you playmaker type of kid you want playing the field also. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of coverage player in today's era that you need at safety also. You know what I mean? Like you get some of these teams that are like A&M and, you know, with the 3 receivers they had, or Notre Dame with the receivers they had. I mean, how many times this year do we see Notre Dame taking advantage of safeties trying to cover their receivers? You know, and you get a kid like him that maybe moves to safety and you're like, dude, that's an elite cover player at safety. He went from being a really good cover player at corner to an elite cover player at safety because he brings all those other traits to the table. And that's what you look at and you love the kid. He's a strong coverage player. Like he's very strong. Handles himself well. You see him play off ball. Look how quick he is to diagnose the play, get downhill, tackle. Again, look at that range, Trev. Like that's outstanding. I'm afraid to go back because I'm afraid it's going to start messing things up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the highlights play through so people can watch, and then we'll try to go back and maybe talk through some things, and hopefully it'll work well by then. But I mean, you can see that range. You can see that those instincts. Like look at him just looking inside. He sees something. He's diagnosed something. Comes downhill, makes that tackle. Like that play right there looked like a Don Schuler more than it did a corner. Agreed. You know what I mean? Like identifying a run, flying downhill, beating blockers to the point of attack, and making a tackle. Like that's that. You see what I'm saying? Like that play right there, that's a safety play, and a field corner play, and also a boundary corner play. Like those are things that I absolutely love about this kid. Just comes downhill, sound tackler, good feet, really smooth athlete. You know, he's not, like I say, he's not super twitchy and sudden. He's smooth. He's fluid. He's more Benjamin Morrison from an athletic standpoint than he is like Leonard Moore. You know what I mean? Like smooth and fluid as opposed to sudden and twitchy. And that's what I like. You know, look at him. I love the trust there, Trevor. Doesn't get grabby. Doesn't put his hands on and yank. He just trusts his eyes and makes a play on the ball.
I was just about to say, I mean, his technique as a junior in high school is spectacular. I mean, he
Yeah.
shoots his hands when the wide receiver shoots his hands. He does a really good job of using the wide receiver as his friend here. I mean, he doesn't get too grabby, forces him to the outside. I think that was great. That was great coverage.
Yeah. And you can see, too, he's not running full speed in a lot of these coverage snaps. He doesn't have to because he's fast enough to just play under control and be hip to hip with these guys. Okay, so that's the highlights. Now let's go back and try to watch it and see if we can actually rewind and show some things a little bit on this. We did see these kick returns. So like this play here we talked about, he's playing off coverage. Look at him reading the quarterback's eyes. He sees the route coming from across. Quarterback's not looking backside. And then that's not his job. He's not supposed to be where he was when he picked this pass off.
Right.
In no way, shape, form, or fashion is this his job to pick this pass off. But he's smart. He sees the ball and he goes and makes the play on it. That's an elite football IQ play. Forget the length, the athleticism, the tackling ability. That right there is something Mike Mickens is going to love. Mike Mickens loves football players that are smart. Yes, you have to be twitchy or you have to be athletic and all those kind of things, but man, he also loves those guys that are smart. And Zay Hassan certainly brings that to the table. But you also see the athleticism, Trev. I mean, you don't return all these kicks back for touchdowns if you're also not a pretty darn good athlete. And if you don't have some feel for the game, that's what I love about kick returners. Great kick returners have to have a feel for the game. They can't just be elite athletes. They have to have a feel for the game.
Agreed.
And Xavier Hassan certainly has that, like all over the place as a football player. Here he's playing off coverage. Look at him with his eyes in the backfield, reading the route, staying in phase, and just doesn't get grabby. He's running the route for the receiver. Like he ran that last route better than the receiver did. Watch this. Staying inside leverage, running vertically, smooth, eye on the quarterback, and he just plays the ball. He's not even worried about the receiver at this point in time.
No, that play right there reminded me of Ben Morrison's interception he had against NC State in 23. I mean, it's a good one. It almost mirror image. It was great.
Good instincts here again, playing off coverage. That means he's keeping everything in front of him. This is so you see a play like this, and what do you think, Trev? Field. You know what I mean? Like this is what I'm talking about. Like, look at that. Just plant, drive, get downhill, make the play. Boom. Easy. You're just stealing. I mean, just the instincts that this kid has are really, really impressive. Now here, why is he letting this guy get over top of him like this? Why is he undercutting the route? Because he has deep help. Look at that. He knows the coverage inside of him. He knows how to play the ball. And he still makes the play on the ball.
Yep.
This is smart. Like, look, I'm protecting the outside. The safety's going to protect the inside. So we're going to bracket any kind of post route, but he still runs with the guy in perfect phase. Or not perfect phase, but in really good phase. And makes another play on the ball. This kid in the last 2 years, Trevor, I think it was something like 7 interceptions. Let me look at his numbers again. I just wrote them down in my film evaluation of him. But let's see here real quick. Something like 7 interceptions and like 9 pass breakups. Let me see here. So this is the article. So he had, where's the number here? 10 pass. He intercepted 10 passes and broke up 9 more the last 2 years. Do you know why his highlight tape is only 3 minutes long? They don't throw at him. I've seen game film. They don't throw at him. Like, I forget which game it was that I saw, but I watched like a sophomore film where I'm like, I watched the film and you're just like, dude, this guy literally put every play he had in coverage on his highlight tape. And it was like 2. Look how smooth he is there. Guy gets a step on him, but he just trusts his instincts, trusts his technique. He will have to improve his footwork a little bit, but like plays like that, I think are perfect for, like, think about him trying to play a slot fade right now from the nickel. That's what this route reminds me of. A guy trying to play the slot fade from the nickel. Look at him get his hands up and find a ball. He's not reading the ball. He's reading the eyes of the receiver. Just gets his hands up and makes a play on the football. It's a heck of a job by him.
Yeah.
Heck of a job by him.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite plays on his highlight tape. Shoots his hands when the wide receiver shoots his hands. That's what Mike Mickens teaches right now in South Bend. It's great.
Look at the patience here. Look at that. The guy's trying to he's like, you're not making any moves on me, man. You're not doing anything to me. You got to do something. Look at that. He's jogging with that guy. Hand fighting, but not grabbing. This is textbook. Now, what he does need to improve upon, watch his footwork gets him a little tight here, and it causes him to cross over a little bit. Of course, now it's not going to show, but his turn isn't super clean because his feet kind of get. I really hate StreamYard so much; it really just drives me nuts. Let me pause this real quick. See if it actually works now. But you see his transition is a little tight because his feet are not in a great place. See what I'm saying? See how he crosses his feet? He turns his hips before he opens his feet. That's why he looks tight on that turn. But you eliminate that type of thing, and he's going to be a much better football. I can't deal with this stupid thing anymore. I swear this drives me nuts. It's like one thing after another with StreamYard. Just one thing after another. Anyway, that's a big-time football player, Trev, for Notre Dame to get. And there's only 2 plays left on the highlights. But you see that, and then you watch the sophomore film, and it's the same exact thing. It's the same exact thing. So it's a big-time football player. Yeah, big-time football player.
Sure is. No, I couldn't agree more. Brian, let's wrap up this conversation about Xavier Hassan with what's next for Notre Dame in the 2027 class.
Well, I mean, look, now you have 3 DBs in the class. You have 2 corners, 1 safety. You have a corner that can play field and nick and slot, right? Field and nickel. You have a corner that can play boundary, field, nickel, safety, boundary safety, field safety. And then you have a safety in Khalil Terry who could play safety or nickel. So you've got 3 players in the class now. You've got very good versatility in the class now. And you've got high-level players. If you just look at the on-3 rankings, your secondary has now added a guy that they rank as the number 27 player in the country, the number 130 player in the country, and the number 163 player in the country. That's the 3 DBs you have in the class now. So right now you are like recruiting the dudes of the dudes the rest of the way. It's only December. You got your first DB commit last year in December. I don't know that you got another one for several months. I mean, your first DB commitment was Chaz Smith. You didn't get Aiden Pouncey, I think, until what, like April? Right? May? I think he was your number 2 commitment. And then the rest of them committed over the summer. So I'm going to try to, Aiden Pouncey committed in April. Your third commitment didn't come until, I think Joey O'Brien was the third. Didn't he commit before Nick Reddish? Or no, Kari Adams committed before Joey O'Brien. So you didn't get your third DB commitment until July, right? Your 4th and 5th came in July. You're at 3 already, and you're not reaching for dudes. You know what I'm saying? Like in the past, if Notre Dame was filling up by December, it's like, dude, you're taking some solid players. These are 3 high level 4-star players that you've already added in a minimum 5-man class. They may go to 6 if they have some departures of young guys, but right now the goal is 5. So the rest of the way, you're just like, it's the best of the best. It's Josh Dobson's. It's the Gavin Williams's. It's the guys like that you view as the elite players in your class. That's who you're shooting for. If you don't think a guy has a very high upside, you don't take him, which is why they've passed on some guys. They've passed on some players who are nice players they could have got, that because they got other players, they've said, okay, we're good now. We're going to move on. And so that's why you saw this Notre Dame staff kind of already narrowed their board. Now it's about who are the dudes that we absolutely have that are the game changers, the true gap closers. And I think you focus on those guys. And I don't care what their recruiting ranking is. I think we've all learned that if Mike Mickens thinks a guy is a gap closer, I care a lot more about that than what. And I care more about that than what I think about a guy. You know what I mean? Because like his track record speaks for itself. So now it's about finding that impact talent, whether it's a 3-star, underrated 3-star like Benjamin Morrison, like Leonard Moore, that's fine. Or if it's a highly ranked guy like Xavier Hassan, like Kari Adams, like Joey O'Brien. Joey O'Brien wasn't a highly ranked player when Mike Mickens first got on him. He became that. That's why I say, like, the top of the top based on who Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman and the staff think are the top of the top. And you get 2 more of those and you call it a day. Now, I think one of those guys is clearly Josh Dobson, who has – I mean, they're trailing other schools right now for him. Notre Dame is not the leader for Josh Dobson right now. I think they're in the conversation, but they're not the leader. So now you get to the point where, with him, where it's like, okay, now that you've got Xavier Hassan in the class, you've got Ace Austin in the class, you not only have more time to focus on Josh Dobson, who, by the way, is a 5-star and the number 3 player in the country. You now say, okay, yeah, who are the top schools that he's looking at? Clemson, obviously. South Carolina, obviously. Oklahoma, teams like that. Okay, now we've got to go to battle against those schools and show him why he needs to come here and be part of this class. And that's what you do next. And if you don't get them, then you kind of turn to some other good players that you think can help you. But now you have a chance to really spend the next 4 or 5 months making your 3-4 corners left on your board, 3-4 safeties left on your board. Maybe it's 4 or 5. Really feeling like, hey, you're our guy. Or you're like not our guy because you're not lying to him. But like, hey, you're a guy that we think takes things to an even another level. And then try to get the best guys from that group that you can. I think that's where you're at. That's where you're at. And you're on the verge. I mean, this is already the strength of the 27 class so far. And it's going to be hard to pass it up. You know what I mean? So, like, if you look at all the things they're doing in 2027, yeah, that's where I'm at. So, heck of a job by Mike Mickens. Once again, shocker, Mike Mickens has landed another dude. I'm floored. I so didn't see that coming.
No.
Didn't see that coming.
No. Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it, right? Well, folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Tonight on IB Nation Sports Beat, you can catch Sean Stiers and me. Actually, I'm helping Vince. While Vince is out recovering, I'll be on IB Nation Sports Beat tonight.
His surgery was like 5 days ago. I mean, he should so be walking around like, I mean, come on, Vince. I know I'm saying that because Vince is in the chat. He's watching.
Yeah.
Gotta put your big boy pants on, Vince. Come on, man.
But
I had major surgery for cancer 5 days ago. Now I'm sitting out the shows. I'm just kidding. Ugh. Vince is going to do something even harder tonight. He's going to cut up this show, which is not a fun process. The best thing to happen to Vince with his surgery is I had to cut up the shows while he was gone, which gave me a greater appreciation for what he does, that he cuts those up every day. So Vince and I may be talking about a pay raise next year for the job he did. So we greatly appreciate that from him. But glad Vince is on the road to recovery as well. But
absolutely.
Yeah, it's good. And we got a lot of stuff planned for the message board this week and next week. We're going to do a lot of, season ending breakdowns. I'm going to dive into all the film and we got a lot of stuff coming out. We put on the updated scholarship chart on the board. It's now on there. Got a lot planned for you guys, including tonight, 5 o'clock, Trev and Sean talking. You guys going to talk some hoops tonight? What you guys talking about tonight?
A little bit of everything, man. We're definitely going to talk about some college basketball. I mean, Notre Dame's men's team right now riding a 4-game win streak. They had about a week off, and then we're also going to talk about Jeremiah Love and him coming up a little bit short in the Heisman Trophy. So definitely be sure to join us tonight.
You know what I've noticed about the men's basketball team this year that's a little different in the past? In the past, when certain guys would have bad nights, they had no chance of winning. And we're actually seeing, like I was watching, it was Evansville, right? Isn't that the team that they played recently? Jalen Harrelson has been playing really well lately. He statistically did not play very well against Evansville. And yet they still won the game and did so kind of comfortably because other guys stepped up. And I think the depth that this team has of guys can legitimately score is something that I've noticed, Trev, is a little bit different from past teams. I mean, Harrelson in that game had 10 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 turnovers, 2 steals. It's not a huge impact on the game. Went 4 of 16. Well, what happened? Braden Shrewsbury went 9 of 12, 8 of 10 from deep. Sir Muhammad comes off the bench and scores 21. That's what I think makes this team a little bit different is they've got more guys can go off and score and help you than what we've seen in past years, where if you shut down Marcus Burton or Tay Davis last year, had no chance of winning. Well, Marcus Burton's not even playing right now. And Jalen Harrelson, your best player, went 4 of 16, and you beat a team by 24. I don't care who you're playing, and literally scored. It was the same score in the first half that it was the second half. And that wasn't a very good team, but guys, Evansville is a team that would have given this team problems in the past if Marcus Burton went 4 of 16 in the game. You know what I mean? Like, do we need to remind you guys of some of the teams they lost to last year in the non-conference? We need to remind you this team lost to Elon last year. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, we don't need to remind you guys of that. So
yeah. That's the two biggest differences is they now have more than just 1 to 2 guys any given night that can score, and they have a much bigger presence on the boards.
Yes.
I mean, Carson Tout's
and Tout only
10
had
rebounds.
6 rebounds against Evansville. They had 2 points and 6 rebounds. And you still dominated. Yeah.
Yeah, they are a very fun team to watch this year, I will say. And it looks different.
Ball moves better. You know, you got legit shooters now. It wasn't just if Matt Locko had an off night, you were kind of screwed. I think Braden Shrewsbury's finally coming into his own. The reality is he on great teams, he doesn't play his first 2 years. And then junior year, like, hey, where'd this guy come from? This is the time when he normally should have been more of a factor, and he's being one. But he doesn't have to be if he can't hit shots. You know, you've got Cole Serta, you've got Logan Imes, Jalen Harrelson. You've just got more good players. I mean, like legit good players. And I just think this makes this team a little bit more dangerous than they've been. I mean, look, I don't know if there's a hotter team in college basketball right now than Michigan. And you could argue that Notre Dame played TCU every bit as good as Michigan did.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that they took them to overtime. I think Michigan also took them down to the wire, if I remember correctly. So, what was the final score of that game? Yeah, Michigan beat them 67-63. That's maybe the best offensive team in the country, Michigan. I mean, like the point. Have you seen the point? Like their last.
Yeah, they're nuts.
Let's see. Since they scored 67 on TCU, they've scored 86, 94, 102 against Auburn, 101 against Gonzaga, 101, 89 against Villanova, and they just scored 101 on the road against Maryland, and Notre Dame outscored them against TCU by like 20 points. So it's just a little bit of a different team than what we've seen in the past, and did it in the second half and overtime. You know, so it's just it's been a fun team to watch, man. And Marcus Burton scored 6 points in that game when they beat TCU in overtime. It's a fun team to watch. This Notre Dame basketball team. It's like, okay, the Shrewsbury vision is starting to come into play. I think that's how I see it.
Oh, absolutely. And like they just, above all else, they just look more the part. They're longer, they're more athletic, they're bigger. I mean, it's a fun season to watch, man. It's definitely fun.
Actually have guys that you think that guy might be able to play in the NBA. Imagine that. You know, it's like, well, that's nice. You know,
I know.
But yeah, like seeing Sir Muhammad step up against Evansville and go off for 21, you're like, dude, this is what a team is supposed to be like. You know, so really enjoying that, what we're seeing from Coach Shrewsbury's team so far. We'll see if they can continue it, but they're off to a heck of a start. And even their losses are like, I mean, I don't want to say it, but like good losses. You know, they lost to number 3 Houston. They were competitive against Houston. They were competitive against Kansas. I would love, Ohio State by a point. Those are good basketball teams that at the time they just were still developing as a team. Harrelson was coming back from the injury, but as they get better and better, it's like I wouldn't want to play Notre Dame in March if I'm Kansas or Houston if Notre Dame can if they can continue to develop the way they are now.
Oh yeah,
it's very
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, folks, that is going to do it for us here today. If you haven't had enough of me yet, tune into IB Nation Sports Beat. We kick off in a little bit over an hour, around 5:05 p.m. On your way out of here, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.
Peace.